Kids like those.
Mr. President, Commissioners, welcome back. It's now 11:30, and before you start, I have asked Justin to introduce an important new key member of our team. Justin?
Thank you, Director Wong. Commissioners, really excited to announce the addition of Rebecca Phillips here to our team. She's replacing Barbara Curbs, who was the Senior Administrative Assistant in our Planning and Projects Division. Barbara, as you know, had served 20 years the ACHD, and so excited to have Rebecca join us. She works closely with our team and helps with a lot of the items that you see every week on your agenda. So I wanted to welcome her and give you. What was that, sir?
Your blood pressure is going down.
Yeah,
now.
it's going down. Without Barbara in the office, you know, my level of ability to stay on top of things diminished greatly. So glad to have Rebecca here. She comes to us from Ada County, working in the court system.
Again, Mr. President, it is 11:31 now.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, as the director welcomed us back, we're glad to be back. In case you don't recognize me, I'm Ken Goldthorpe. Anyway, we'll begin our pre-commission meeting by asking the commission if there are any questions about the agenda.
President?
Yes.
Is my microphone picking me up well? I don't know if it's, I turned it on. Let me try it on this side. Is that better? Here, I'll put it here. All right. I have some questions on a few of the consent agenda items. If it would be appropriate to go through those right now. Okay. Item number 2 on the consent agenda, the low activity nuclear density gauges. I just have kind of a technical question. How do these differ from the previous nuclear densometers? I'm familiar with how they work. I'm just curious how the new ones. It's great that they don't require approval by or registration by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. That's great. How do they work? How are they different? Is there anyone that can tell me that?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, I'll give a 100,000-foot answer, then I'll ask one of the experts to come up. But bottom line is that it reduces the risk to the team members, lower radiation, lower housekeeping, so to speak, if you're familiar with those sort of things. That's the reason why. As I understand, it's actually more accurate across the board. So about 5 or 6, 7 months ago, the commission allowed us to bring in 2 as a test bed. Well, our team's been doing that. Our laboratory team and stuff across the board, they work excellently, and so that's why we're asking to replace the rest of them to remove that extra burden of with the NRC, those sort of things. And
Okay.
so that being said,
Well, you know what? Maybe it'd be better if just on my own time I'll talk to the experts on it, because it's really just technical questions. But so the conclusion that they function better
Yes.
than the previous ones
Yes.
is based on our own testing,
Yes.
not just word of mouth or
Correct.
sales pitch. Okay,
Correct.
good. All right.
And they're less
President.
expensive.
Yeah. I will also ask Jennifer, our head lab individual, to pick a time that's convenient for you to give you a call so you guys can sit down and have that discussion.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. It's just really for information. All right. Item number 5, just for clarification, this is the federal aid capital maintenance. So this is federal aid money that comes through ITD that goes then to our maintenance program.
Yes.
All right. I just thought that was good to clarify. Now, the final question, items 6 and 7 on the consent agenda. It looks like 2 different interagency agreements for one project. That was a little confusing to me. The one is for, let's say, for Victory Road to Overland, and the other one says, 10-mile road, Victory to Overland, and then the other one says 10-mile road and Victory Road. Are these 2 separate projects? Are we doing the segment of the road separate from the roundabout? Is that what this is
Mr.
reflecting?
President, Commissioner McKinney, yes. And again, both are fully refunded by Meridian.
Okay. All right. That was all. I just wanted to clarify those things. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner McKinney. A couple of my questions too. Just one typo note. It's helpful to put Nuclear Regulatory Commission before referencing NRC because I couldn't remember what NRC stood for when I was reading the memo. And so it's just like, I know, Commissioner McKinney doesn't have a problem with that, but NRC, what does NRC stand for? It's the old federal alphabet soup. There's a tendency to put the acronyms in without signing. And then on number 5, I think it was just left out. I had to look at the 5-year plan online. The segment on Edna Street is from 5 Mile to Patton, I think. The actual reference in the document on, for some reason, I think someone probably said, oh, I'll get to it. It's from 5 Mile to some street. It says 5 Mile to blank. And so I thought, how far is that? Because I know there's a bike project over there, and it sort of overlaps a little. So I think that's immaterial because there's already something online that says what segment it is. On the warm springs piece of the item, just much like Commissioner McKinney, if I could get an update on how this treatment will impact the Skybar crossing. Just a little more detail, because I know that we get questions, and I'm going to improve this. We're going to be dealing with the Skybar crossing in that segment with some of this federal aid money, but I'm not too sure exactly how we're going to deal with it. So a quick update would be helpful, and I know Justin and I have talked about that as part of the federal capital aid project going forward. Question for you, Director, on number 8. I was a little confused. It says the bid came in below the engineer's estimate, which is great, but it came in over the budget, which is like, so do we set the budget and then we do an engineer's estimate later? Because they're about the same time, because it was kind of confusing. It's like, wow, great. One of the few times now that things are coming in below engineer's estimates, and then it's like, but it's over the budget. So is there a reason? Is that just a timing thing?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, I'll make sure I get this right. The engineer's estimate, the budget was based, as you know, on the original project. At that point, the commission directed us to add additional things to that. We did another engineer's estimate on what that budget would be, or what that estimate should be. That's the one that came in 7% below, but from the original budget prior to the changes, it's now 60% above.
Okay, from the original budget we did before we did the enhancement.
Did I get that right?
Great.
Very good.
Then the last question is, on number 9, are these ARPA funds, or this separate? And do we, when we go in for our PPEs for our own use, regardless of COVID, are we sort of bundling or kind of piggybacking or taking advantage of the opportunity for bulk PPEs, or is this completely separate from ARPA? And here I'm doing an acronym, American Recovery something Act. Right? The federal money for COVID, for helping local governments with COVID, is this separate, or how does it?
The expert answer that one.
Thanks.
No, it would be separate, but we do keep track of what is used on this contract for COVID-related things. So the PPE in general is for our maintainers, a lot of eye gloves to do their job. We did add more onto the contract because we do use this contract for the other face masks and things like that. So we keep track of that separate as COVID-19 costing, and then that goes into the bundle if we get reimbursements for
Right,
that.
and we go back to the county for reimbursement.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. President, Commissioners, yes, I'd like to deviate a little bit. I think I'll be doing this every other week. As you recall, a couple weeks ago, I brought in our treasurer to give you some insights as to the treasury operation here in the district. We are going to continue that through the years so that we bring in a different individual, be it a new GEO or one of our deputy directors, to brief you specifically on different aspects of the operation. So today, I'm very pleased to have the world's greatest communications team talk to you about what they're doing now and what they're going to be doing in the future, to give you just a little bit of heads up. So Shandy, over to you, please.
Thank you, Director, Mr. President, Commissioners. Nice to be here. Well, I just want to start by saying that it's just been such a fun 7-8 months, however long I've been here, and leading just such an amazing team. You have not met everybody on our team, so I wanted to introduce a couple new faces to you. So first one might not be a new face, but she is new to us full time. So Avery Forster. So Avery graduated with her degree in media arts with an emphasis in public relations and a certificate in nonprofit management from BSU. She actually started interning with us in mid-January. She was working very closely with Christy on public involvement, and we really couldn't let her leave. So when you approved the new position, she joined us full-time permanently in August as our communications specialist, and she's just been doing such a wonderful job since then. Next face you'll probably recognize as well, so Lacey Pittman. Lacey recently relocated to Idaho to enjoy all that Idaho has to offer, including a niece that she's spending a lot of time with. She previously worked for Starbucks for 5 years, where she got a great passion for customer service, which is something we love, obviously. So she did a lot of trainings in de-escalation, customer connection, and management, which made her the perfect fit for our face and voice at the front desk. So she is our new administrative specialist at the front desk, taking all those calls, routing tell-us, and greeting customers as they come in. So welcome to Lacey. So today I'm just going to give you a very high-level overview. This is not comprehensive of everything everybody's doing day to day, but it's some of our larger projects. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm an auctioneer on the side, so if at any point I'm talking too quickly, please just stop me if you have any questions at all. And my whole team is here or on Zoom, so if you have any, we're happy to answer. I have one more team member I'd like to introduce. He doesn't have a name yet, but this is our new elf, and he just came in from the North Pole. He will be our star on social media over December to help educate the public. He's going department to department and helping to get information out there about programs and projects and everything we do here at ACHD in a really fun way. So staff is currently voting on his name, and you'll have an update soon. So stay tuned for that, but I did want to introduce him. He was very excited to come here and watch today. So going through what we're currently in progress on, we have 7 submissions on our art contest, and it wraps up this Friday. From there, we will start judging those. We have a couple different ways to judge them, determine what pieces of equipment will be wrapped, and how the presentations will be given out to those students. And we have some really fun pieces of art, so I'm excited to be able to show those to the public. We are currently hiring for a video production intern. We just finished interviews and have extended an offer, and we're excited for a student to come on board to help with all of the video production work that we have, because we have a lot of ideas for videos coming up, since it's kind of just the new way to get information out there. We are working on a kind of newfangled way to put out information from all sorts of different angles for one of our large projects, 11th Street, led by Amber. So you'll see a lot of projects of hers today, but we are working together closely with her as the PM and the project team to be able to show new ways that people can find information on what the project is and how it will impact them, including some cool maps, and there's some fun things in store. We are working with, it's a lot of cross connection between different departments, so I'm excited about that. We have video projects that we're working on currently, so you probably saw our healthcare shout outs, our Thanksgiving video, veterans shout outs. We have the holiday video in the works and working on the winter ops video as well. We're working currently on a north end construction work map. So we have a lot of projects coming up in the north end, and we wanted to be able to have a succinct way to be able to show businesses, neighborhoods, what's happening, what's coming up, and how it might impact them when things are starting and ending. So we'll have a couple different versions of that. We have a print version that's in, I think, final draft right now, and then a digital version that will be coming. We did 29 outreach efforts so far in 2021 with PIMS. And we debuted a couple of new features, such as sliders, making it easier for the public to compare existing conditions with future conditions, or with future improvements, and more sophisticated drawings to give more realistic view of the project. We are also soliciting more public feedback on federal aid projects with the increased ADA improvements, pedestrian connections, bold outs, etc. So we're excited to get their feedback on those types of projects. We are currently working on a tree trimming mailer that will be sent out to specific neighborhood associations, and will be hitting their mailboxes within the coming weeks. We're also working on a proper sign placement information reminder mailer. So this is something that we get a lot of comments about on social media, a lot of calls about, that signs are in the wrong place. And there's a lot of different reasons that can happen, but we have identified that sometimes it's just that people don't know. So it could be a landscaping company that came and they did work, they moved the sign, they didn't put it back, or they put it back in the wrong spot. It could be a real estate company that's placing their sign in a location that it shouldn't be. So we're starting with education. That's always the first step. So we're putting that together, and it'll go out to neighborhood associations, it'll go out to real estate agents, it'll go to landscaping companies. So we can try to help educate them and remind them of where and the why, because I think the why is really important, and maybe not what somebody is considering when they're moving something. So winter ops, we're in full swing with communications for winter ops, and are continuing to be on the edge of our seat to see what's happening with the weather. But we did send email campaigns separately targeted with messaging to businesses, neighborhood associations, HOAs, and schools, and reminding them their responsibilities, and then what we're doing as an agency as well, and how we're prepared. Erin is also going to the South Pole Alliance Neighborhood Association to give a presentation on winter ops as well, and is happy to go to any others that that she can get her hands on. So if there's any others coming up that you guys know of, please let us know. She's happy to attend those. And we're working on a website cleanup. So we've reviewed over 90 web pages, archived over 40. So hopefully that will help customers that are viewing our site to not be so confusing that projects have closed, they're finished with, so it doesn't get as convoluted on the site. In the future, my team will be out tomorrow. We have a nearly all-day branding workshop. So that's something that we're really looking to focus on, is branding for the agency. And that could look like a lot of different things. So it could be everything from logo to colors to mission, and how we ensure that all of that is getting across to the public. So we'll have more information for you on that, but we are really excited to dive into branding. All right, we are also we're exploring what it would look like for a website update, and that is an exploration. So we will start looking at demos with companies and find out what companies can offer that would make it more streamlined for customers to interact on our webpage and watch meetings, find the agenda, everything like that. And we're also looking at Tell Us, the process in the system, and how we can improve efficiencies, decrease response time, decrease manpower, and some frustrations as well. We are looking at project or service follow-up surveys with the community. Depending on what snow situation is, we might do a name a plow contest. We are setting up a media mixer when Rachel's back. She will be meeting with all the media, just build that foundation and relationship with all the media when they're starting to do stuff in person again, and helping to answer their questions, offer them ride-alongs so that they can better understand what the agency does. We have the communications connection, which is us inviting the city and other agencies, communicate folks to ACHD, and doing this very similar thing. So introducing our team, who we are, so they know who to call if they have any questions, and vice versa, offering them ride-alongs as well. So they'll be on site hopefully in January or February, and we'll just be able to enhance those relationships so that they always know who they can call. We're working on a night crew sweeper edition video, rainy day stormwater testing video, urine review video. We're working on roundabout education, some video shorts, surveys, working with BSU, exploring the possibility of virtual reality scenarios, so people would feel like they're actually driving in a roundabout and find out how to handle that without actually driving in a roundabout. Not sure if it's possible or what the cost might be, but we're just exploring it. We are going to be starting Facebook Live with commissioners, monthly topics. We're starting with Commissioner Goldthorpe in January, I believe. We're set to go live, and then can rotate each commissioner in with different topics every month to help the community understand more about ACHD and then provide you with the opportunity to do Q&A with the public. We are reinventing Road Wizard, so there's more on that to come, but just having Road Wizard be able to introduce new topics, answer questions, things along those lines. That'll primarily be on social media. We're working with consultants to increase the level of quality for exhibits they provide to have better end user experience for customers for PIMS. And in FY22, we will be asking consultants to provide a comment summary that includes an infographic style executive summary. We've used these in the past, but we're hoping to have that more standardized. We are working on a Let's Get There Safely campaign for teen distracted driving that would include a video series as well as in-person activities with students in schools. We are also looking at an internal newsletter to help ACHD employees stay in the know in a more succinct way. And then when our PIO is back, media training for those that might go on camera as subject matter experts. I think that is all. Did I talk too fast? Does anybody have any questions for me? I'm happy to take any questions.
Mr. President, Shandy, I feel like the sense of the entire commission is like, holy cow, amazing, inspiring, what a load. I just wanted to commend you on a couple of things that really caught my eye in your report out. So I think it seems like you really understand and grasp the importance of that cross collaboration amongst all these partners, because communication has to happen with all of our different divisions. So tremendously applaud you for that shift. That's really, really exciting to see. Plus, the work zone map is something that I've been hearing from constituents in meetings, so thank you for doing that. That's really exciting. As well as the signage education, I just am really impressed with your responsiveness to just the things that people are asking for in the community and responding and actually trying to fix those things. It's really, really exciting to see. And then I know we've chatted before, but the website is a bit of a challenge for those of us that don't use it on the regular, and I've gotten lots of messages about, can you help me find this? And I'm like, I don't even know. So in your exploration, I'm really curious to get those updates from you to the commission on what you find out, because as we move forward in doing all the things that we do, it's going to be really paramount that how we communicate and serve as a resource for our community is accessible even on our website. So very exciting. Commend you 110% for all the efforts that you're undertaking. Very exciting.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Oh, good. Great. I do
Thank
have
you,
copies
Jamie.
if anybody wants that list as well.
Thank you.
You're doing an awesome job.
Thank you, guys.
Commissioners, I think you'll agree with me, world's greatest, correct? Right?
Yes,
All right, very
that
well.
was quite,
The only
quite
thing she didn't
impressive.
do was say going once, going twice, sold. Otherwise, it was perfect.
You need to get paddles. Oh, yeah.
That's right. Aren't you supposed to have a gavel?
Yeah.
A couple admin things, Commissioners, very quickly. First off, you have your event tonight. You're elected, the Boise Center on the Grove event. Thursday at 10 o'clock, you have the Commercial Developers Advisory Committee will be in session via Zoom. We sure will. December 6th is the next BAC meeting, and we'll have a link for that. December 7th is the Meridian Chamber Holiday Luncheon at 11:30 to 1. It's in the West Ada District Training Session. If you do wish to attend, please leave us Stacey or I know. We are taking a couple of folks from our team to attend that, so please let us know. December 8th is the AGC ITV Excellence in Contracting Awards. As I shared with you, I think yesterday, the day before, ACHD won a gold in for the Gowan Road Bridge project, and so those awards be handed out. I do know several of us will be attending. It is a commission meeting day, and such, so if a commissioner does want to attend, please let us know, and we'll make the arrangements and such for that. And And then, finally, December 8th, is the AGC, annual gala. I know that you've been, offered, if you do, wish to attend, please, let us know and we'll take care of, all those issues for you. So with that, Commissioners, that's all I have for you today. Do you have any questions? Okay, you have, about 6 minutes, Mr. President. President, Commissioners, it is now 12 o'clock.
Thank you, and welcome to the Ada County Highway District. We will begin our meeting as usual with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, thank you for your attendance. We'll begin the meeting by entertaining a motion to approve the agenda. Yes. I could hear you.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
There's a second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Carries. We'll go now to the consent agenda, and items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted.
Ken,
Your
your
microphone's cutting
video
out.
is, your audio is going in and out. It's too new.
Should be working. And if a citizen or commissioner so requests, we'll remove the item from the consent agenda. All consent agenda items are considered action items unless otherwise noted.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Getting my batteries changed. Thank you. So can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll go into our regular agenda then, and the first item of which is the ADA compliance audit that has been ongoing for a number of months. And Scott Spears is here, and he'll be doing some tag teaming, I'm sure, with MIG.
That's correct. Mr. President, members of commission, my name is Scott Spears. Can everyone hear me?
Microphone on.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, I will start over. My name is Scott Spears, Assistant General Counsel for the Ada County Highway District. And I'm here today for presenting for approval the ADA compliance audit of ACHD operations final report. And before we get into that, I would just wanted to note that and suggest that this is yet another step in ACHD's exceptional efforts to comply with the ADA. And I would note for the commission, way back in 2005, ACHD adopted the PED bike implementation plan, and that was the first in the country, well, one of the first in the country, and certainly the first in Idaho to adopt such a plan. That plan was later amended by the commission in 2019. The commission approved an ADA coordinator position. It has also approved ADA inspector positions. So this is yet another step in ACHD's exceptional efforts.
Got a question for you, Scott.
Yes.
So how common are these efforts nationwide, or are we doing something that's a little bit of the tip of the spear?
We are definitely at the tip of the spear, Mr. President.
Thank you.
So as a part of this final audit, it contains comprehensive recommendations for right-of-way accessibility, including but not limited to the application of ProWag, a refinement of existing ACHD measures, and development of new ACHD measures, recommendations for snow removal and, for leased park and ride facilities. The final report also contains a comprehensive ADA decision compliance matrix in the form of a spreadsheet, which provides a decision tree for staff, consultants, contractors, etc. Approving the final audit report, recommendations, and compliant matrix will allow our consultant MIG to proceed with task 2B of the project, which is development of ADA standards and designs for design and construction. And these will refine these policies and procedures and standards for accessibility, which will come back to the commission later for consideration and adoption. And staff recommends approval of the final report. And with that, I would turn the time over to our consultant, MIG. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Commissioners. This is Steve Burke with MIG. I am also here with Vanessa Hofstetter from our office, and we're pleased to present on this report to you. So I will share my screen here, and we'll move ahead. So as Scott already mentioned, we're presenting on a compliance audit of ACHD operations. And the audit report, final report, was issued in September 28th. That was a privileged document. So it was revised November 5th to remove that privileged documentation within the report. And the goals of the audit report were to assess ACHD's policies and programs for accessibility, and identify updates and additions with regards to accessibility. And as Scott had already mentioned, we looked at right-of-way improvement policies and procedures, snow removal policies and procedures, park and ride facilities, as well as contract language to use for procuring design and construction services that address accessibility. So with regards to the right-of-way design and construction, the report evaluates existing ACHD policies and procedures against regulatory requirements, as well as some guidance documentation. Those regulatory requirements would be ADA, MUTCD, and Idaho statutes, and guidance would be PROAG. And again, the idea was to look at those documents, the regulatory requirements and guidance, compare them to what ACHD is currently doing, identify any gaps that exist between the two, and then recommend measures to fill those gaps. With regards to snow removal obligation, with ACHD having jurisdiction over the right-of-way in Ada County, we took a look at the current removal policies, and then the report identifies some recommendations. And again, I'll get into more detail on those elements a little bit later here in the presentation. For the park and ride facility assessment, we reviewed owned and leased facilities, and we evaluated them for accessibility conformance, and again, provide recommendations in the report. And with regards to accessibility language for requests for qualifications, consultants are responsible for accounting for accessibility in their designs, and so we identified, highlighting that in the RFQ documents and contract documents. So by way of an executive summary for the report, we're looking for the Commission to implement the accessibility recommendations in the audit matrix, which we'll get into more detail here. Recommending that you refine, develop, and coordinate policies for snow removal. Arrange for some additional review of the park and ride facilities, and then address accessibility requirements in your design, RFQs, and contracts. So with regards to the elements of the report itself, section 1 of the report is an introduction, and basically it discusses how ACHD is currently working diligently towards the requirements of Title II. And as Scott just mentioned, you guys are at the tip of the spear here with regards to developing that for the right-of-way here. The district is looking to implement stronger, more coordinated approach for the right-of-way. And while accessibility is embedded in some of your processes, a more consistent approach is desired. And then just kind of to point out that the accessibility and the recommendations in this report, they all address, both new facilities and existing facilities. So part 2 or section 2 of the report addresses the accessibility compliance matrix. We developed this compliance matrix that's included in Appendix A of the report. It's populated with the regulatory requirements, which again are ADA, METCD, and Idaho Code, as well as design guidance, which is PROAG. The matrix reviews the current ACHD policies and standards against those requirements, and identifies gaps and makes recommendations. So these next couple of slides, discuss the content of the matrix itself, but I think what I'll do here is I'll open up the matrix and walk through that, because that will be probably easier to understand. So 1 second here. So the matrix, as Scott mentioned, is an Excel spreadsheet, and it consists of a number of tabs. The first 2 tabs are kind of informational about the matrix itself. First tab provides for an overview. The second tab is an index of the content of the subsequent tabs, and those subsequent tabs are where we actually do the evaluation, analysis, and recommendation. So what you'll see are topic names for each tab, and then the subtopics that would be addressed in a particular tab. So I will open one of the tabs and walk through that to kind of show the evaluation process. So I'm opening here the crossings and crosswalks tab. And what you can see is that we start again by identifying the topic, which is crossings and crosswalks, and then the accessibility subtopics associated with the topic. We then identify in the subsequent columns, next group of columns, we've got like 5 here, the regulatory requirements and the PROAG guidelines that we reviewed the subtopics against. And then we identified where there was an existing regulatory requirement, and we provide a hyperlink to that for purposes of comparison. Next group of columns then identify where we have an overlapping standard, should PROAG or MUTCD or ADA or what have you overlap with one another. We would identify which one was more stringent, and then which one would be used as the basis of design for analysis. The subsequent columns of the matrix have to do with existing direction that is in place at the district. So essentially the policy manual, as well as any sort of standard plans, details, features, that sort of thing. We then identify where we anticipate potentially developing new direction should the commission decide to implement the recommendations. And this new direction would supplement the existing direction. And it would consist of basically flowcharts, checklists, that sort of thing, in order to ensure that accessibility is being addressed in design and in construction. After identifying potential measures to address for new guidance or new direction, we then highlight the specific ACHD standards and policies that address the subtopic. So whether that be specifications, standard plans, policy, we identify those. And then what we did is we reviewed those against both the regulatory and the PROAG guidelines, and made an assessment as to whether or not they were adequately addressing those requirements or not. If they weren't, we would continue our review. If they did, we would identify how they did so. In the case of continuing our review, our observations or recommendations are then provided in the subsequent columns, where we identify ways to bring the current standards and policies into compliance, or where maybe new guidance would be required. So now I will jump back to the presentation. Here. So this slide here, again, I just walked through the Excel spreadsheet. Same here, right? Discuss the columns within the various compliance tabs, how those are used, and then ultimately, what the matrix is doing is providing recommendations where regulatory compliance isn't sufficiently addressed. We recommend ways to modify and develop ACHC policies and standards. And then where those regulatory requirements are insufficient, as in, for the right-of-way, where they're silent, we recommend applying PROAG. So section 3 of the report then discusses PROAG, the PROAG guideline and its costs. And so the ADA requirements address scoping and for buildings and sites. They don't really speak to the right-of-way, which has a lot of different intricacies to deal with compared to building on a new site. And so PROAG is developed to address accessibility in the right-of-way. Again, it's recommended to be used where regulatory requirements are silent or don't cover the topic. And PROAG currently is a best management practice. It's not an adopted legal requirement. However, the Access Board is anticipating that they will complete the PROAG rule this spring, and then it would subsequently be adopted. And once adopted, it would become enforceable. It would become a regulatory requirement. So with regards to cost, implementing PROAG now as a guideline compared to just following guidelines would be a cost increase, but really only a cost increase where you're dealing with accessible pedestrian signals, detectable warning surfaces, or tabled intersections. In most other cases, PROAG aligns with ADA and essentially elaborates on ADA in the right-of-way. But if you do apply PROAG now, you would result in a cost savings by avoiding the need to retrofit to meet PROAG later when it becomes a rule. And for an example where maybe just following ADA and not PROAG would be an issue, ADA with regards to running slope of a pedestrian path, identifies a slope of 5% or greater to be a ramp, and you would need to put you would need to build landings and put handrails on ramps. And as we all know, a lot of our streets are greater than 5% in slope. What PROAG allows you to do is just match the roadway grade with your sidewalk slope as compared to, if you followed ADA, you would technically look to put in ramps and handrails along those sidewalks, which we know is not something that would do and would be extremely costly to do. Section 4 of the report discusses accessibility requirements for RFQ language, and past RFQs issued by the district had ADA compliance listed in them. However, we recommend more detailed ADA compliance language in those RFQs to make it stand out and make inform those consultants that are providing qualifications, make them aware that it is a responsibility. But more importantly, we suggest that the language be included in not only the consultant scope upon award, but in the contract requirements in order to make accessibility a requirement and not solely rely on the RFQ, which ultimately is not enforceable once the contract is awarded. Section 5 of the report addresses...
Steve?
Yes.
Got a question for you.
Question back on the previous
Sure.
slide. That language down there at the bottom, is that intended to be an example of the more detailed ADA compliance language, or not, or is that something else?
That is correct. That there is one of the recommended language formats that we propose for you to use both in your RFQs, and then you may want to either use that or elaborate within the construction contracts depending upon the scope of that, or I should say design contract. And the scope of that design contract.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have one, maybe premature, and you can tell me if it is. With that particular aspect of the RFQs, will we be utilizing our current policy manual, traffic standards, and everything else that we're addressing today in our evaluation of those RFQs and RFPs afterwards? You know, if we'll be doing
Yes.
that, or will we expect the people that are submitting bids to be experts at this?
What we would look for the consultants to do is to be aware of these accessibility requirements, and in the contract and the scope would list those requirements in more detail, would give reference to your standards such that they can then access them, be aware of them, and apply them during the course of their designs.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Jumping forward to section 5, snow removal. Snow removal is a safety and accessibility issue, and the district is obligated to anticipate and plan for clearance of pedestrian facilities for the sidewalks. ACHD has the jurisdiction of the right-of-way in the county, but that's in coordination with others, because you're working with with the cities that have the snow removal ordinances and policies, as well as some of those ordinances and policies call for adjacent property owners to clear snow. So, but ultimately that jurisdiction does lie with the district. And so based on that, we just recommend some updates to ordinance, maybe refining and identifying those partnership roles that you have with the cities and property owners, and then enhancing communication and outreach to the cities and the property owners to ensure that they're aware of their responsibilities with regards to snow removal. Part 6 of the report assessed park and ride facilities. We reviewed 6 owned facilities and 11 leased facilities, and our review was done remotely. We looked at as-built drawings that were provided by the district, as well as Google Earth and Street View, in order to perform that assessment given COVID constraints. We reviewed against the 2010 ADA standards. Some facilities were compliant with 1991 ADA standards, and those, again, may remain until such time as you alter them, and then you want to bring them up to current standards. And with regards to ACHD-owned facilities, we recommend integrating the findings into the SETP in order to address those moving forward. And slide 7 here just talks about next steps. We're looking for the commission to approve the audit matrix, and then we MIT would move forward with developing that additional guidance to meet accessibility within the right-of-way. And there's a lot of documentation and issues to address, to develop and coordinate with the district and the staff, and so the timeline for completing that is approximately a year. With regards to snow removal policies, we'd be looking to, again, identify partners, engage with them, agree to roles and responsibilities, and enact policy with those partners. And then, with regards to the park and ride facilities, identify action, integrate that action into the SETP, and then implement it moving forward. And so that there concludes the slides we had on the report itself. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Any questions, commissioners?
Mr. President, I just have a couple questions, either for Steve, Merck, or for Scott, but mostly just sort of clarifying a couple of things. Would that be appropriate now?
Sure, and could you speak up?
Yeah. Is this not on? There we go. Just want to make sure I can be heard. We've had the opportunity to review these and look at these and evaluate these when they were confidential and before they were released, and so that we've had our chance to dive into them, and I really, really appreciate legal staff and MIG taking those observations and input from the commission. This is a long time coming, and it is so good. And just to provide a little context, the reason we do this isn't just because it's the law, but because it's right. It builds healthy communities. Businesses are much more resilient when they've found when they are all provide access to all citizens in the community, and a key component of that access is in the public right of way. I have a couple of questions, Scott. So just to preface, so when we put it out there to the public, we got some responses from the public to say, well, what about this and what about this? So I mostly want to put it on the record just to say we're going to grapple with them, because as it plays out, we'll deal with them. First is this interesting coordination with ITD, because ACHC already has a maintenance obligation on sidewalks with ITD facilities in Ada County. So we have this relationship, but we also say, except for designs of state and federal highways. So we have to work something out. There has to be some sort of relationship with ITD to figure out who's going to do what, both as to the sidewalks and as to the curb ramps, but I don't know if they're considered parts of the sidewalk or part of the road. So is that the follow-up of what we're going to do with ITD? I know FHWA requires a lot of things as well, so it's not just the ADA, but if you build something with FHWA money, they say you have to do this and this and this and this, and these are accessibility and maintenance are part of those obligations.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, for the record, Scott Spears, Assistant General Counsel. Yes, we do have a current cooperative agreement with ITD. It does not currently address an obligation for snow removal of sidewalks of those ITD roadways within Ada County. And so, yes, at some point, then we would open that dialogue with ITD.
Yeah, because I know ITD facilities go right through the middle of some business and neighborhood areas. Just a quick question: when obviously we got to figure out a system in terms of where we put snow when we're plowing it, and when snow piles up, there's two things. One is if it freezes, it becomes very difficult to remove, and so just clarifying what the expectation is on the city or a private property owner. And one of our, somebody in the public gave us information on an ordinance that basically says, you know, the obligation on the city or the private property owner to remove natural snow is what applies if a public agency, ACHD, plows a pile and it freezes. It's their obligation to clear it. Are we going to have to deal with that distinction between natural snow and the piles that will accumulate? That's another ordinance or policy change we'll have to do.
Yes, we are anticipating policy changes that would reflect a number of those issues and topics that were raised by the public.
Great. And then the last one is just, how do we deal with curb ramps which extend into the road? So are they considered sidewalks? Are they considered roadway? Because the obligation of a private property owner ends at the sidewalk, and yet, so it's like, how are we going to deal with that, or do we have to have a whole update to our definition?
Again,
who's going to do what?
Commissioner Hanson, that will be a part of our efforts in policies and procedures.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. I just can't say enough about how landmark this is, and it's not just because we're being required to do it, because we understand that the whole system functions well, and that everybody operates better in a system like this. And so we're kind of a model for other areas to pick up on that. And I really appreciate that. We do have a to-do list, so I really appreciate Steve and Vanessa, the detail with which you've approached this report. and you have a to-do list for us, we understand we can't do everything, but you do have a to-do list and a process for us to go through. And it's kind of spelled out those steps that we're gonna take. So I can see us doing that. And I agree with you, the more we can do that in anticipation, the less costly it is in doing it as a retrofit or later on.
If I can, Mr. President, Steve Price, General Counsel, for the record. Commissioner Hanson, you always raise good points when this issue comes up. And as you know, ACHD's taken ADA and compliance very seriously. As soon as the Sacramento case came out in 2003, 2004, we were one of the first ones to really get on that. But the whole issue through this process of snow removal has been a big issue. And Commissioner Pickering, you've been laser focused on it, and we appreciate that. We're recommending that we come back to the commission in the near future and have a workshop, kind of a free dialogue of issues surrounding that, and develop a plan going forward to address the snow removal issue. And so there's a lot still out there that we need to work through internally, as well as with public and our partnering agencies. But I think a workshop would be the way to get that going, and we can have that dialogue.
Very good. Yeah, it was frustrating when we had our joint meeting with Boise City, because this hadn't been released publicly yet, and that we knew what was coming down the road, so we couldn't have a conversation with Boise City. A few days later, of course, it came out. So I know this will be a topic for joint meetings with our partner cities in the county. And it'll be very productive as we figure out ways, and probably, 6 slightly different ways of doing things to make it work in each of those cities. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. President, I have a couple comments.
Sure.
I just want to say thank you to our staff and MIG for this exceptional report. We can't fix what we don't know is broken. And, this is a huge step in the right direction in helping us create and foster and continue to move forward with building a safe and accessible infrastructure for everyone. So I just want, publicly to share that I'm really looking forward to implementing and working towards these recommendations that you've described, and fully support this report.
I've been sitting here on this commission since we began the discussion on this, and I remember vividly one of the people that gave testimony as we were deciding to go ahead with this, who, while confined to a wheelchair and coming off of a ramp, in our fair city, did a face plant, and was not pretty. And the thought of that having to happen because of anything that we might have done or designed or not designed was unacceptable to everybody on the commission. That's one of the reasons why we're here today. And so I congratulate MIG for the scope of this report. I congratulate everyone who is agreeing that it is a living document, because we still have to amend policies and make decisions on some of the elements of this. And I'm really happy with the opportunity to approve this. Yes.
Hot. Oh, there you go. Just want to say thank you very much to MIG and to staff. This has been a heavy lift. It's going to be great to have this roadmap and this document to go forward to make sure that we're doing things right, and look forward to seeing it implemented, and just want to say thank you very much. And I am also in full support of what we've got before us, so thank you.
All right, now because this is an item that has been presented to us merely for approval, and it's not a public hearing, do we need to be taking any testimony from anyone, Steve? Yes, okay. In that case, now is the time. Stacy, is there anyone that would like to speak to us on this?
No one has signed up on Zoom.
All righty, is there anyone here person that would like to address this item? Steve would.
Well, I don't particularly want to address it, but I do want to, for the record, note that we did receive some email correspondence
Yes.
that I believe you all have a copy for the record.
Yes, we did. Good correspondence and things that I already know from the questions and conversation here today is being addressed. All right, then, that being the case, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve this report.
Mr. President, I move to approve the ADA compliance audit of ACHD operations.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll go into item number 2 right now, which is a discussion on the appeal of a staff level discussion by the city of Boise, BOI 21-0217. It's the Ovation Boise Mixed Use Development. And Christy is going to give us a presentation on this, and then she is going to maybe without Steve's help, tell us what we are here to decide on this today.
Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. Christy Little, Development Services Manager. Happy first day of December. Today, we will be hearing an appeal from the City of Boise for BOI 21-0217, which is a development that we refer to as Ovation. It's a 19-story mixed-use building, plans for over 200 apartment units, parking, and commercial uses. This application meets all ACHD policies and was approved at the staff level on August 31st of this year. As a reminder, you've seen part of this before. On October 11th, the city requested a waiver of policy for the timeline to appeal, and you granted that waiver on October 20th. And then on November 3rd, the city submitted their formal appeal regarding the proposed driveway on Broad Street. Site is located at 521 West Front Street with frontage on also on 6th and on Broad.
Wait, Christy, can we just have a second? Zoom's having some issues right at the moment. Seems like Zoom is having an issue. It's like it's frozen. So somebody is still seeing the MIG. I can see with me, I got double typing. I see Christy's map, but I can't type, or can I get out of anything? There we go. I think we're good. Now let's show again.
It says participants can see it, but I don't have it on my screen.
Sorry
There it
about
is.
that. Here we go. All right.
This is the, now we'll go back. No, I can't do anything again. This is the site plan that the applicant submitted with their design review application. As you can see, it has, down here at the bottom of the screen, just one access here on Broad Street. And this is in accordance with ACHD policy. Obviously, they're not proposing access to Front Street, which is an ITD roadway. 6th Street is an arterial, and want me to wait?
Every time she gets up, we add more people to the participant list, so.
All right. So the city is requesting or appealing, ACHD's decision, regarding the access on Broad Street. They are requesting that access only be on 6th Street. Doing so at this point would require the applicant to totally redesign their site because of the structure and nature of the building. In addition to our policies, they can tell you about their issues with redesigning at this point. This morning, though, the development team and I had a very lengthy discussion about alternatives or what we can do. It's very clear that the concerns are about, well, how are the people in this building going to get in and out when there's street closures associated with the festival street. And so the development team and I this morning talked about possibility of an emergency access / service drive on 6th Street. It wouldn't, under their current building design, they could fit it between 2 columns without redesigning anything. It would be barricaded with standard bollards, but during times of Broad Street closures, it could be opened up as a temporary driveway. Just a idea that we floated out there. The applicant hadn't proposed it because they wanted to design this in accordance with our policies, and they did. I shared that information with city staff after that meeting, and said, hey, this might be an alternative to move forward without coming to the commission for an appeal. And city staff said they appreciated that, but they still wanted to seek your input.
Christie?
Yes.
There's a couple of other parking garages on Broad Street. Do they have additional access points as well, or strictly on Broad?
Well, just generally in the downtown core, we've got parking structures. Some of them have access onto Myrtle via an alley. You think about the very downtown core, there's driveway structures in the downtown core, pretty much on every street.
How about right here on Broad, do you know?
Right here on Broad, there is not a parking, the parking structure for the Wilder takes access off of an alley.
Okay.
Since you're on that topic, the Bass Block doesn't have access to a parking garage, does it? Would that be considered like a festival street?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, the Basque Block was already developed prior to making that a festival street, and they all have alley access. So policy implications, here is our policy regarding driveway spacing on minor arterials. So you can see here that in multiple ways, our policy says that if you have frontage on a lesser classified street, that's where you take your access from. So Broad Street, we consider it a local commercial, like many streets in the downtown or that aren't arterials. That's kind of, we just have those options downtown. 6th Street is again the arterial. So as you can see here, if the property has frontage on one or more streets, access shall be taken from the street having the lesser functional classification. Driveways located on an arterial may be prohibited when the property has frontage on one or more other public streets. And we talk about ADTs, and that direct lot access to minor arterials is typically prohibited.
Christie, can I ask you, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I ask you a question on that last point? In this case, of course, I'm well aware that the 6th Street has the lower functional classification. Does it also have lower ADT?
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Or sorry, Broad Street has the lower ADT.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, you're correct.
Okay.
Mr. President and Christie, so this, I'm looking at this policy, and it references basically the movement of cars, and ADT. It has no reference to our pedestrian level of service that we have now adopted for level of stress. we don't have a tool under this, policy to balance the ADTs and the movement of cars on these choices. We don't have that tool yet as applied to this. Is that correct? We don't have a.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, yes, commissioners, as you're aware, we've, our policies and the implementation of those, level of service guidelines haven't caught up to each other yet.
Right.
And that is what we'll be working on, in the coming months. You know, I understand, the issue of vehicular conflicts and pedestrians. This wouldn't be the only driveway on Broad Street. Just a block over is, Trader Joe's with a driveway on both, Broad and 6th Street. And really in the whole downtown core, we consider that pedestrian. There is significant pedestrian movement. So to say that we shouldn't have a driveway here because of significant pedestrian movement, I can't correlate those two, because generally in the downtown core, that's what we expect, and those are the policies that we've used.
So, and one more question. So the way in which we apply this policy is regardless of whether there's a master plan, an adopted master plan for a specific neighborhood that might be inconsistent with that policy. We don't look at that. So the central edition master plan isn't relevant to the application of this particular policy, 7205.46.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, the commission hasn't adopted that plan, so I cannot apply those plan policies. However, I believe there are other developments on Broad Street where the plan hasn't particularly been applied in the same way with regard to access. That's for the city. But again, the definition of a festival street, we're seeing the city and CCDC wanting to use it more broadly now, in the Lust Street area, Grove Street, Fulton Street. These conversations are coming up. We have to have driveways somewhere, and Festival Street doesn't necessarily imply that the street's always going to be closed, or that it's a heavier than normal focus on pedestrians. And so I couldn't make that finding with this one.
So those are land use decisions by the city.
Correct. All right, so here we go, President Goldthorpe. I think this was what you were getting at. So the last, the second policy is, of course, our policy as it relates to appealing staff level decisions. We dealt with this a few weeks ago, where the applicant is by our policy, the only person who can appeal a staff level decision. So the first order of business for the commission, after listening to testimony today, will be, or you can flip the order if you want, you can make this up front, will be to determine if the city has standing to appeal this decision, since they are not the applicant.
So Christy, Mr. President, I just had a quick question, because this was definitely something that I was going to ask you about, the standing that you referenced in the report, and like you said, we just had this before us a little bit ago. So are we going to determine whether or not they have standing to appeal before we go through the testimony, or we're going to allow them to testify and then we're going to decide whether or not they have standing?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner May, that is completely at your discretion. If the last time we dealt with this, you elected to hear testimony and then made the decision. If you want to make the decision, that can impact how much or no testimony occurs. But we can get through my presentation and then talk about that further.
Thanks. Thanks, Christy.
Mm-hmm. And then we have modifications and waivers. So if the commission determines that the city does have standing to file the appeal, then the commission will need to make findings. Well, let me back up. If if the commission determines that the city has standing, and the commission grants the city's request, then the commission will need to make findings in accordance with 7104.1. Because if the commission grants what the city is asking for, it's, as you've seen, it would be a modification or a waiver of our access management policies. If the commission finds that the city has standing but then denies the appeal, then no findings need to be made and the staff level decision stands as written.
Christie, the staff level decision, you had mentioned the access on 6th with bollards that can be used occasionally. Can that still be?
That is a staff level decision, and so that I could continue working with the applicant and the city to detail that.
Thank you.
Where do we go? Just some additional information to provide you that wasn't in the staff report. This year, ACHD, this calendar year, has received less than 5 days of closure requests for Broad Street in this section. In 2020, it was less due to COVID. Based on that, staff hasn't been able or does not find that such limited closures for events in the street should outweigh access management policies, which are based on safety.
Christie, how about pre-COVID? Did you check those?
Do not have those.
Okay, thanks.
But I don't think it was anything different than John Watson provided me with the information, and you know how detailed he is. So had it been much different than this year, you would have told me that. In the letter in your packet from the applicant, they've indicated that they're, willing to work with the adjacent owners who are seeking these road closures for their business events, to find solutions for building, parking, on those days. They indicated in their letter that they've done this in other areas. And then again today, they've indicated how they can incorporate an emergency access. And then I guess just to bring you up to speed on where they are, the city has deferred the design review hearing a couple of times in anticipation of today. So they are scheduled for next week, December 8th, for their design review hearing. So order of business for today. The city, as the appellant, will have up to 10 minutes. The applicant's team will have up to 10 minutes, and they are with us via Zoom today. Members of the public that wish to testify have up to 3 minutes, and then if necessary, if rebuttal is necessary, up to 5 minutes for the city and 5 minutes for the applicant. So with that, staff's recommendation is that the appellant is not the applicant and does not have standing. And the August 31st approval meets all ACHD policies. Staff had no basis to require a driveway on 6th Street based on those policies. So I will stand for questions.
I have none. Anyone?
No, Mr. President, my main question is, I think we need to decide whether or not, we're referring to them as the appellant, but if they don't have standing to appeal, then I think we need to establish that before we go forward. That would just be my.
The city will make a request to recognize them, I assume.
Pardon?
I assume that's what the city's presentation will include, the one we're about to hear?
I don't think so.
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioners, it's up to the commission to determine standing. The city's information is their appeal.
I think, Mr. President, if I may,
Yes.
In a recent case where we had a similar issue, we went ahead and heard the testimony of the appellant and then ruled on the standing question at the end. I don't see any reason not to do that here. I'm certainly willing to hear what the city has to say on this. So I think we should just go ahead and let them have their say and then discuss all of the information at the very end.
I would agree. I did the last time when we had this issue before us, which was the only time we've had it in the last 7 years in my memory. That we not make a habit of doing things that would set a precedent that we otherwise don't want to see set. So let's go ahead and do it that way if that's okay. Okay, then
Turn it over to the city.
we'll hear from the city.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. My name is Josh Wilson, representing the city of Boise at 150 North Capitol Boulevard, Boise, Idaho 83701. Really appreciate the opportunity to be before you here today to discuss our appeal of the staff level decision on the project generally known as Ovation in downtown Boise at 521 West Front Street. We value our partnership and our working relationship with ACHD, and I can assure you, as previously mentioned, that this is a highly unusual situation. I think Christy in the waiver hearing mentioned that she's seen this 5 times in 20 years, and in my experience in 15 years with the city, it's the first time I've been faced with this as well. So certainly an unusual situation. We appreciate your willingness to have us here today and to speak to this matter. So to kind of give a little bit of background on how we arrived here today. So with any large, complex downtown development such as this, there are a lot of conversations internally with agencies and with stakeholders regarding design, city policies, and how the application complies with those policies. During our review of this project, we did determine that the proposed site plan with access on Broad Street was in direct conflict with policies in the Central Addition Master Plan, which has been mentioned, and that regarding the desired pedestrian environment on Broad Street, that the proposal could have substantial negative impacts on those recent public investments on Broad Street. So after some conversations with ACHD staff, the applicant, we were not able to come to a consensus that access on 6th Street was appropriate. We were informed by ACHD staff that our recourse to contest that decision was to appeal the staff level decision. Subsequently, we did request the waiver of the appeal time period, which was granted by this commission in October. And now we are before you today after having submitted the request. Again, we do not take this decision lightly. We do not, we prefer to work these out at a staff level with ACHD. We have had great success in relationships with ACHD staff over the years. And I think that's evidenced by the rarity of this request. We're very successful in working through these types of issues and coming to an amenable agreement. And we certainly appreciate ACHD staff working with us in that way. So in your packet, we provided a memo highlighting our reasons for appeal, that we feel that a waiver from district policy is necessary and justified. We feel that the site is unique. There is a major arterial roadway controlled by ITD on the north. There is no alley on this block of downtown, which presents some challenges. There was mention of the projects on the south side of Broad that do have an alley for access, which creates a whole different conversation in terms of what access on Broad looks like. What's generally known as the Fowler to the south does not have direct garage access onto Broad Street, and neither would to the west, south of Churchill's, the Marriott Residential Suites doesn't have direct garage access on Broad as well, because again, both those properties have alleys. So that is a unique condition. The Festival Street designation and the public investments that have been made on Broad, we also feel is a unique situation that warrants some further discussion as it relates to ACHD policy. So the applicant's proposal as submitted with that access onto Broad would have significant impacts on that pedestrian environment, the special sidewalks, the limited access from garages onto Broad that have been established following the Central Addition Master Plan policies. And for reference, there's been a lot of talk about the Central Addition Master Plan, and just kind of informational piece. We're generally talking about from Capitol to Broadway, east-west, and then between Myrtle and Front, north to south. So an older established neighborhood of Boise that has seen a tremendous amount of change over the last decade. Some very large residential projects, starting with the Fowler a number of years ago, and more recently, some pretty substantial new projects on Myrtle Street. So it's an area that was identified as a transitional neighborhood in Boise. The Central Addition Master Plan was developed to address the emerging concerns in that neighborhood in terms of how it grows, densities, appropriate use of streets. During that process, Broad Street was identified as a special street that was worthy of a designation with enhanced pedestrian facilities, limited vehicular access, and policies in the Central Addition Master Plan support that. Protecting Broad from access to parking facilities and vehicular access is most preferably taking from existing alleys. Again, complicating factor on this block is there is no alley. So to fully comply with the Central Addition Master Plan and the goals and policies of the city, we do request that access be taken off of 6th Street.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Was that discussed with the developer during the process of them meeting with your staff?
The developer had met with ACHD staff prior.
Oh, I meant your staff.
Yeah. It came up in August during our review of the application. After they had submitted an application that had access on Broad per ACHD direction, we then engaged them in August with discussions about that access onto 6th Street.
So that they didn't come to you with any indication of the 6th Street need before August?
Correct. President Goldthorpe, that is correct. Yeah, the applicant has consistently advocated for access onto Broad.
But you didn't know about it until August?
After we worked through some stakeholder discussions, some department leadership discussions, in the August timeframe is when we determined that was the appropriate approach.
Okay, you're still not making myself clear. When did the developer tell you they wanted to use Broad?
When they applied for the application in June.
In June,
Yeah,
okay,
correct.
thank you.
Could you explain when the master plan was approved and how that fits in with this timeline? Because that seems a little unclear to me as well.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner Perry, the master plan has been in effect since somewhere around 2012, 2013, so substantially prior to this application.
Let me, Mr. President, if I may,
Yes.
one and sort of a follow-on question to that. With the approval of the master plan and the city's intentions for this street, this corridor, has there ever been any kind of agreement sought or put in place between the city and ACHD that anticipates modification of or an exception to ACHD plans and policies in this area because it's a unique area, or was that not ever addressed?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, to my knowledge, that has not taken place.
So the city didn't ever ask for special consideration or some kind of a different agreement as to policies in this area compared to the rest of the city?
To my knowledge, no.
Mr. President, I have a question just to clarify. So the developer stated that the city had been informed of the access. They had discussions about the access issue early on, and since July of 2020 that it was known by the city. So I guess my question is, then you did not engage with the applicant until August of 2021 about your concerns? I'm just trying to get the timeline.
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioner May. So there were some initial discussions with the applicant in terms of, and we get these inquiries very often at the city in terms of developer has a potential property that they want to develop. They contact us, determine zoning, allowed uses, building height. We kind of start to those bare bones essentials of what this development ends up looking like. sometimes that conversation includes discussions about access. The developer, I think even at that point, had some guidance that Broad Street was the preferred location. I don't know if that was through conversations with ACHD staff or just their general knowledge of district policies, but the Broad Street access, was kind of baked into those early plans. We were probably remiss a little bit in not pushing back at that point, but again, these are complex conversations with a lot of stakeholders, and it takes, the application was submitted in June of 2021, so that's when we had an application before us with material, with a material proposal to evaluate. At that time, we can really dig in, hold those conversations, and determine what's appropriate. These are not black and white, easy decisions. Certainly the city in other parts of town has policies relating to access on arterials, and we recognize access management, the importance of it. Downtown is a more nuanced conversation. These are more complex environments, and it requires just a little bit more discussion on firm direction in terms of what we end up requiring.
So, okay, and thank you for that. I do have a question, and I do want to commend our staff. As Christy mentioned, that she had a conversation today with the developer about the emergency access. What is your objection to something like that? If you could share that with us.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner May, I think, and I'll pull up this slide here. The Broad Street elevation, if that primary garage access is located on Broad, becomes very service and vehicle dominated. So in the lower right-hand corner of the screen there, you can see that, what that building looks like at the street level on Broad Street with that garage. You have transformers, you have a garage entrance, you have service bays, you have a move-in bay for residents. So keeping this elevation as is and adding a secondary access onto 6th Street, I don't think addresses the city's concerns about what this particular proposal does to Broad Street. It's very service and vehicular dominated, and which we feel is in direct conflict with the policies in the Central Addition Master Plan.
Thank you.
Are you done, or do you want more questions?
I can continue or more questions, whatever.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, you probably will get to it. I mean, there was evidence that we've only had a couple of closures for festivals, but my observation is the master plan and the new residences that are in construction. I don't know that they've leased those two huge apartment complexes, which are taking, I think that's what Christy said, taking access off of the side streets and not off of Broad for their garages. It's basically going to dump a lot of pedestrian activity onto that, and so the character of that street is about to change. Is that true? Based on the fact that there's these two, and I think there's even a third one over by Winco, massive residential structures.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, there are 3 significant apartment projects underway that front onto Myrtle. Most of those do not have frontage on Broad. So there is the one at 3rd and Myrtle, which is fully occupied and open. I don't know the name, things change with marketing, but when it was going through the process, it was known as River Caddis. But it's at the corner of 3rd and Myrtle. That one is fully open and operational. There is the apartment project across from Winco to the east, under construction, and then also the project at 4th and Myrtle under construction as well, and I believe it's pretty close to being finished. So somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 residential units between those 3 projects. So you can see the massive influx of residents into this area. When combined with those in the Fowler, a pretty significant concentration of apartments and people in this part of town that certainly wasn't there 10 years ago. I mean, I think anyone in this room probably knows this area looked much different. So it's an emerging neighborhood. These are emerging issues. We see a growing pedestrian focus on Broad Street and a growing need for this kind of special treatment of Broad.
So what you're saying is that because Front and Myrtle being both 5-lane state highway, they're not pedestrian friendly. Presumably that's not where you are designing these apartments to direct pedestrians, they'll be going onto Broad, right? And that the anticipation is that there will be a very different character as you get more residents. Is that what
Mr.
you're trying to
President,
say?
Commissioner Hanson, I think that's very well stated. Front and Myrtle are not comfortable pedestrian, pathways, and they will be concentrated onto Broad.
Is there anywhere else in the city or even in Ada County that has a comparable level of heavy investment in residential pedestrian activity that is sort of pinned in by these big state highways?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, to my knowledge, no. I'm sure there could be situations, but certainly very heavy recent investment in addition of residences to an area that is fairly unprecedented, I would say. Again, we do hold that the site has some unique characteristics that are such that strict enforcement of the policy would result in extraordinary economic and design hardships. And that garage entrance on Broad Street does directly conflict with adopted city policies, making a waiver of district policy appropriate and what we would request today. A modification of district policy will not be injurious to the adjacent properties. Deviation from this policy is not abnormal in downtown. There's been the Trader Joe's site across the street mentioned before that has access onto 6th Street. And there are other parcels in downtown that do access the higher classification roadway when others are available. The city of Boise recognizes the significant resources and investments that have been made into this project. With your thoughtful consideration of this appeal, we look forward to working with ACHD and the applicant to come to an outcome, I think, that benefits the urban fabric of downtown for decades to come, provides a pedestrian environment on Broad Street that is supported by city policies, and that will provide the public with the greatest good. We feel that we have a strong responsibility to get this right and have a conversation about this. Projects like this downtown are extremely complex and take some time to work through some of these significant issues. We appreciate the developers' patience. We appreciate being here today in front of you, and thank you.
Mr. President, I'm just, maybe it's a question for Christy, but could I have any clarification on, because this is a very expensive, and for lack of a better term, oversight in melding these two policies together. And I just want to understand the timeline in terms of, the design with the developer, because to your point, these are very complicated projects. I don't want to see this type of waiver of policy or anything create a negative ripple effect where we start getting a negative connotation to making things even more complicated to getting these really important projects funded and designed in our downtown core, because they're so important. So could I just get some clarification around what is the design process and where are we? Where is the developer in this process? Because this would be likely expensive for them to fix. So I want to understand where are they and what is the negative impact for them?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, I can address that from a city standpoint of where they are in the process. So they have applied for a design review application. Our submittal requirements for design review are a fairly extensive list of drawings. It's not construction level drawings. It's a site plan, it's building elevations, it's landscape plans, it's building materials. It's what an architect would refer to as design development. It's still in the development stages, HVAC, structural engineering, those things are all yet to come or may have been started by the applicant depending on their timeline. But at design review, that conceptual plan is in place that really outlines those major elements and where they're located. Once that design review application was approved, they would move into construction documents, which are the extremely detailed engineering, HVAC, plumbing plans. So depending on where the developer is in their internal process, they could be in varying stages of cost and involvement and investment in this design. We certainly see applications that are brought to us at a very conceptual level, and that those next steps haven't been undertaken. And we see projects that want to hit the ground running, and maybe they've invested a lot of work into those types of plans. So I would leave that question probably be best asked by the developer, answered by the developer.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I think I read in the document that the developer has already spent several $100,000, I think, on this development. So they have a significant cash outlay to this point. And then I just wanted to clarify here also that Trader Joe's, I think they are both 6 and Broad. It's not just exclusive to 6.
Mr. President, Commissioner May, thank you. Yes, that's it. Yep, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering and Commissioner May, like Josh said, that's probably really great questions for the applicant, and I bet they'll be including that in their presentation anyway.
Thank you. You did great.
Alrighty, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I wasn't sure we were gonna need to hear from the applicant. Now I'm sure we will be, but we do need to. So if the applicant could come forward if they're here. They're on Zoom, all right.
Can the commission hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Zoom's always a question when we get into these hearings remotely, so apologize for that. Hopefully you can hear me.
The closer you could be to your microphone, the better.
You bet. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yep, now I can with the way your face is directed.
No problem. I'll just stay close. You can see my face a little too close to the screen. My name's Randy Ginther. I'm the president with Hubby Properties. We are the owner of the property at 521 West Front Street, and we are the group that is developing the Ovation project. I won't go into great detail. We did kind of detail some of our things in the memo that we sent you. Where we find ourselves is in a very precarious position. We're stuck kind of between 2 policies that are at conflict. We tried very early on to get ahead of this process. We met with city staff, we had a development staff, we walked the site, we went through the entire process that the city suggested in terms of bringing concept drawings forward, getting reaction, getting feedback. That was formulated over a very long period of time to make sure that we were designing correctly. We were consistently referred that ACHD policy would be driving where the location of the garage entrance would be, which is the policy we were following, in discussions both with city staff and with ACHD staff to make sure that we knew where that entrance was going to be, understanding that there was some conflict, but we were told and directed that ACHD's policy would dictate that. So that is the understanding we worked forward with in our design process. It was really not until recently, August timeframe, that we were informed by a member of the city staff that there was an issue now with the entrance, and really we said, well, we need clarification. We'd like to have a discussion, but we couldn't get a discussion. Planning staff said it's an issue coming from, quite frankly, the mayor's office. And we said, well, we'd like to discuss that. And so we continued to ask for that discussion to understand the main issues that had to be solved. And we didn't get to have that conversation until after the appeal was filed, really the day that you were deciding on whether to grant a extension of the appeal. Is really when we first had a chance to talk directly with the mayor and some of her staff about the issues in which we were.
And Randy, for the commission, could you just tell them when you started this process? Because I think it's important. There seems to be some disconnect with regard to how long you've been talking with the city about this.
Yeah, sorry, Doug Gertz is our senior vice president. He's also on this call. So that was Doug. No, really, our process started back 15 months ago. We engaged with the city right away when we were looking at this project before we even purchased the site. So this has been an ongoing process for a very long time. We did detail some of those points out in our memo that we sent you. So I just want to convey that we've been working in very good faith, trying to follow the system, trying to follow the policies, and we find ourselves kind of in this in-between, now in conflict, kind of holding us up from being able to move forward on the project. We're very sensitive to the goals to keep Broad Street pedestrian friendly, to keep it active. We think that's one of the reasons we like the site and we want to do this project, because we have developed in other communities similar products, and we think pedestrian bicycle vibrancy is very, very important. That's what makes people want to live where they live. So we're not in conflict at all on some of those goals. I think it gets down to a little bit more of the finer policy differences between ACHD and the city. That being said, we did take a great deal of effort to review the site, the traffic flows, the nature of how cars would come and go into the site, our own experience with traffic flows in similar buildings of this size. And we did analyze that very closely, and we do believe Broad Street is the safest access point, for the building. Quite frankly, we think 6th Street it's more narrow, it's one way, the sidewalks are more narrow, the view sheds are tighter. It's one way coming off of Front Street, which lends itself to potential conflicts, backing up towards Front Street. Trader Joe's has an entrance, which would be kind of going at each other if we had to try to line something up. We also fear, quite frankly, flow-through traffic through Trader Joe's parking lot, because most people are going to come off of Capitol Drive instead of going all the way around and back to Front Street to come back on a one-way street to get into the entrance. So we think we're going to get some conflicts coming through the parking lot, because that's the path of least resistance, right, to get to the entrance of the garage. So with all those things being said, we think safety-wise, this is a much better choice. I heard a lot of discussion about pedestrian-friendly. It's a very nebulous, unmeasured, thing. What is pedestrian-friendly? To be clear, we're not changing any of the improvements on Broad Street. We're not advocating for parking on Broad Street. We're actually enhancing the streetscape. We're actually, per the city's design, directives, we're enhancing that whole street. We're adding retail to the street. The building currently, has curb cuts that go to a generator, that go to a loading dock. The transformer's in place where it is, and it serves not just our property, but the law school building as well. So there's some things that have to stay where they are, but we're actually improving all of that streetscape, in furtherance of, enhancing Broad Street. We're keeping the sidewalk the same. We're not modifying the length. So from our perspective, the pedestrian nature is not going to be impacted. We did all the traffic studies required by ACHD, which really yield that it's not a very high traffic flow. In our own experience in multifamily of this size, is that multifamily traffic flow is very gradual. It's not like office, it's not like heavy retail where you have rushes of cars coming and going and overwhelming entrances and exits at one time. It's a much more gradual flow, and the traffic study really bore that out from our perspective. The peak traffic flows are not very high. So we don't see pedestrian friendly being impacted by this location. And as far as the festival side, the desire to have the street closed for festivals, we can understand that, and we see two solutions to that. One is active management, which we have done in our other properties. We have properties in the middle of urban areas that are very pedestrian friendly, that have events, and it's about managing your tenants and communication and when our street's going to be closed and advising them that they won't have access for a period of time. It can be done. But two, as mentioned earlier, we were willing to add an emergency additional entrance on 6th, but we don't think that should be the primary everyday entrance and exit for the building, because we don't, from a safety perspective, we don't think that's the right spot. But we certainly are willing to do that to facilitate, the festival closures, which again, there's only been a handful of those on this street to date. I'm not saying that won't expand in the future, but it hasn't been a prevalent feature of this block to date yet. But we're willing to do that if that helps move this forward. We also, in doing that, we could also relocate where the garbage primary point is to Sixth Street as well, and bring down the restaurant frontage even farther on Broad Street. We'd be willing to move those functions. Again, we were following policy in this design. As far as cost, we have invested a lot of money in a high-rise construction. Structural becomes very important. So very early on, you have to start figuring out your structure, how you're going to access, what all that engineering looks like. So, you know, I can easily represent to you that we have spent many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars in the design work based on the direction we have received, you know, from different agencies, staff.
Could I ask you if you
yeah.
could be, maybe a little bit more specific about that? You said hundreds and hundreds of thousands. That's pretty nebulous.
Sure. You know, we have dug in design work alone with our architecture firm. I believe we have spent roughly $400,000 in the design work, which has to start in a high-rise from the ground up. So everything has to start from where these entrances are, where the access points are. So everything above it relies on what's below it. And so that's where a lot of the challenge comes in changing now this entrance forces us to go back. It's not just moving a door to the other side. It's re-engineering and redesigning the structure from the ground all the way to the top.
Would you anticipate that would involve another 400,000?
It's a great question. I don't think it would be that much, but I would say it would definitely, it would be a redesign. So I would say it'd be several $100,000.
Okay. Now, you obviously haven't fronted all of this, at least I wouldn't think so, with your own cash. So I assume that you've got some time value of money working here, meaning carrying charges and interest. How much would you think that might amount with the delay that this would cause?
Well, to be honest, it is with our money. We have funded this, but you know, as you would expect when you make an investment, there's a return on your money. It's a negative return on our money the longer that this goes. We are investing our money on the front end, and so there's a cost because that's a cost that we otherwise would be investing in something else, but we're losing that value of being able to invest and make a return on that money. I can't give you an exact number what that is, but there's definitely a cost.
Okay, thank you.
And Randy, on top of that, you know, for the commissioners, we've purchased the property.
We did.
Operating the property, we've been paying property taxes and carry costs, and that is a very significant purchase for our company.
It is.
And it's very, very, very big investment for us. And we did this predicated upon our due diligence and these meetings with the city. So you can understand how, and ACHD, you can understand how, you know, difficult this is for us to delay and then go through a redesign process.
And I would just comment these delays as well as far as cost. As everybody knows what construction costs are doing, this has delayed us multiple months because design review meetings have been pushed, so we couldn't continue to do the more detailed construction and more detailed drawings because this has to be figured out before we can do that. But construction costs have gone up dramatically even in the last 2 to 3 months. They continue to go up, so time is hurting us in this project. And we're trying to do an extremely quality project. We're the long-term owners. We do these projects ourselves. We manage these internally. So, you know, we're really here for the long term, but it gets harder and harder, you know, as we've been delayed.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for him? Do you have anything more for us?
No, I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, I would just reiterate, you know, we don't want this to come off as negative. We're not mad at the city. We understand the concerns. We did talk to the neighbors that had contacted us. We understand they want to have that be a festival street to benefit, you know, the economics of their businesses. We understand that. You know, and we really think that the value we're bringing with our development and the hundreds and hundreds of new residents that'll be right outside their door is an extremely big economic benefit to the neighboring businesses. that far outweigh, 3 or 4 or 5 road closures a year. We're gonna be supplying, all that additional, business to them, with our development. So, we wanna work with everybody. We're willing to compromise. We're trying to follow your policy. And, that's the direction we've been following all along.
Thank you.
Are there others to testify?
Pardon?
I assume we have others to testify.
I didn't understand you, sorry.
Sorry, do we have other people who are testifying?
Well, we're gonna decide whether or not to hear them yet. We're taking this one step at a time. My own personal thoughts are that, we need to have some discussion right now about what's been said and decide whether or not to take this any further in terms of testimony. Because again, this is so highly unusual as to almost never have happened before in the history of this agency. Also, there's been such a tremendous amount of time that the developer could have but didn't know about this particular problem. We have a conflicting set of policies, which, in my opinion, we've had our policies for a long time. And when another of our partners changes the policy themselves, somebody needs to tell the other one. And I'm not sure that that we should be holding the bag, if that's the right wording, or take any blame whatsoever for the policies being in conflict. The beneficiaries of the policy changes are, of course, the city. And so I would have thought myself that those conflicts should have been brought to our attention a long time ago, because we are more than willing at the drop of a hat to start considering and redoing our policies whenever it's this obvious that it needs to happen. But it didn't, and it hasn't. I personally am not.
Mr. President, could I just see, so we're talking about the appeal or the standing?
Well, we've gone 2 steps now. And so I was addressing what we have just done. And then if anyone else wishes to, that's fine. And then we'll ask what you want to do. And I would expect we would address the standing sooner than later.
Mr. President, I would move that the commission waive any limitations to the city appealing based upon the unique facts of this situation and the fact that we couldn't consider certain relevant facts. I would ask that the city be granted standing to appeal. So I would make that motion that we waive any limitation to the city appealing this issue.
Is there a second to that motion? Motion dies for lack of a second.
So, Mr. President, I'd like to speak to this, and I totally sympathize with the applicant. They had to deal with policies they're given. They're dealing with cities all over the country. We are a very unique situation, and I don't blame them for not probably realizing that, in fact, you have to deal with 2 elected bodies with their own separate sets of policies, both of whom are short-staffed. I appreciate the city admitted that they have probably been remiss in not being more aggressive in sort of identifying how to do this. Those are complex conversations, they said. So I sympathize. This is not rooted in anybody's bad behavior. It's not rooted in anybody's malfeasance or nonfeasance. It's at a core of the fact that we have policies in place that deal with access to buildings regardless of what the land use activities are. And this is a very unique land use area. It's changing, and the city anticipating that as the land use agency. We keep saying we don't want to do land use. We're not supposed to do land use. But not allowing the city to move forward on a fundamental policy of the city's land use for the central addition is basically saying we are vetoing a land use decision process that you would like to move forward on.
Jim, do you see any?
I think that's inappropriate, and that's why I think the city should have standing. Just because our policies don't make that really clear that they should automatically have standing, and I'd like us to amend our policies, we have to make this additional finding that in fact there are unique facts in this case. And the city should be able to make those appeals to this board.
Okay, but
This is
that
a
died
Ada
for
County
lack of a
issue
second.
only.
That died for lack of a
So
second.
I'm debating.
President, I'm appreciating his explanation personally, but yeah.
I have sat on that street when it's been closed. And I can imagine in 10 years, as cars are going through the middle of that street trying to access a large garage, probably looking somewhat like a large garage going into some of the new garages coming off of 6th Street, further north, or the convention center, all other places, people will be sitting there saying, you know, what had to happen to make this? Who messed up? They may not use the word messed up. Our job, because we're ordinary people looking at this thing, not getting stuck on some language in our policies that say, okay, you have to do this or you didn't do this, that something that is fundamental to the investment in a particular area that the land use agency is moving on and will be held accountable to the voters on. They've made these decisions. That's their job. But because we have this bizarre, unique situation in Ada County, we have the roads right away is owned by ACHD, and we have access management policy. Frankly, none of this affects the movement of traffic that we're most concerned about during the peak hour and those sorts of things. This is fundamentally a land use decision. It's not Christie's fault. It's not anybody's fault that we didn't have tools that we could balance in our policies against a standard access management. But the fortunate thing is we have a policy that says the commission can waive a certain policy, and if we find unique circumstances, and I think the city has more than met that test,
In
not
what
only
way
for
specifically?
standing,
I'd be very
but
interested
for the
in why you
appeal.
think that is even close. Because I haven't seen a thing that meets the standards of findings of fact.
I've read through the record, and I think we have unique circumstances. I think there will be significant damage. This hasn't even been before the city's decided yet, but I expect probably for some additional costs as they go forward.
He needs more batteries. It's been on.
So I mentioned, and I would also ask, strong case based on the fact that these circumstances exist.
Okay, and so in order to get that done, we have to make and have a motion to either accept or reject the appeal, and we haven't decided. Well, we have decided on the standing. So what's the issue now? We don't have a motion to give them standing that got a second. So that failed. Is there another motion?
Mr. President, just as a matter of a question, I'd like to ask Commissioner Hanson what facts he's referring to that the city has presented that show that this is a unique situation, which the statute and the ordinance require. What characteristics of this site are unique that make it, impossible for them to meet the standards that currently exist? I haven't heard you mention any facts. I'd like to hear some facts that you think.
So yes, absolutely. We have, having sat on the commission now for 9 years, there's been a number of occasions where we have supported a modification or waiver of policy based upon far fewer facts. This is a unique location. So I'm going back to 7104.1. This is a unique location. We asked the applicant, is there any place else in this entire county that is set up like this, where you have these two 5-lane roads? Nope. It's not pedestrian activity at all. The investment in the way that the city has described the Central Edition is in the vibrant business activity dependent on pedestrian activity on Broad Street. It's very unique. I've never seen anything else like this, and the city has indicated there's no other place that they're aware of.
Well,
very unique conditions. It would result in extraordinary economic and design hardships. So here's a place where these two, and we've got, and I assume they're going to speak to this, the businesses that are across the street, and they've made investments on the expectation that the city will fulfill its obligations under the master street, under the Central Edition master plan. So they've made an investment in that block, and this is from the owners of the Wilder, Foreman Function, and Boise Brewing, and I think they've made that indication. It will be not injurious to anybody else. In fact, it'll be beneficial to anybody else. And they are unique. It's a unique area. I think it doesn't contravene any other policy if we say the city can make a decision. Ideally, we wouldn't have two agencies doing this. This would all be handled within one elected body.
You know,
it'd be the transportation, but we don't.
First,
we have
you've
two
said that
separate
we're a bizarre agency. Now you've said that we're not the ideal.
Either one. So I'm not. Well, the question is, what should we do going forward? And if we create a significant burden because of the way the limitations in our own policies and the inherent differences in our structures than other cities, and the vision that's been described by the city and laid out in the Central Edition master plan is undermined by moving forward on this.
Okay, can I respond to some
and
of
I think that
Jim,
we would
please.
be doing a huge disservice to the taxpayers if we don't recognize the city and grant their appeal.
Okay, Jim, can I respond to a couple of your points there? Number one, the statement by surrounding businesses that they think this will hurt their business, that's an opinion, that's not a fact. Number two, your comment that the site is unique, well, that's true for all real property. All land is unique. It only exists in one place, and it will naturally have characteristics that differ from every other parcel of land. So the uniqueness required here is a uniqueness that makes it impossible or impractical to follow the policy. We don't have anything like that here. The problem here is that it seems to me the city has a vision for Broad Street, and they want it to be a certain way. And the basic desire, the basic intent is a good one, and I don't have a problem with that, making this a pedestrian-friendly area and so on. The trouble is, the city never put into place or sought any sort of special agreement with ACHD that would modify policies in this area. That sort of thing is possible, so that it could have happened, but that's water under the bridge. We can't go back and change that now. We're dealing with the policies that are in place now and the ordinances that exist now. Let me get back to my train of thought here. A major concern that has not been addressed, well, the applicant addressed it. When I say in this case the applicant, I mean the developer, is the fact that the developer has made a substantial investment going forward for a substantial period of time now, planning to build this project, and never now until the last minute has the city come back and said, oh, by the way, we don't want it to be this way. We want it to be a different way. And they say, well, ACHD doesn't even allow that. And here we are all this distance down the road on this project. Not only that, but a compromise position that seems to me solves all the problems has been presented, as in a second access point that can be used for those occasions when, you know, they would like to diminish the traffic on Broad Street for pedestrian purposes. In those rare occasions, having that secondary access, that strikes me as a very, very viable compromise solution that could meet what the city says they want, and still not be inconsistent with our policy. And so for these reasons, you know, looking at the substance of the claims of the appeal, I don't see any facts that actually justify it. And then we come back from that, when we come back to the standing issue in the first place, and I have to agree that, you know, we can't just willy-nilly abandon the standards, the ordinances and policies that are in existence just because. We have an obligation to proceed forward in the manner that the current ordinances and policies dictate, because developers and the city and other agencies that we deal with are entitled to rely upon these standards that exist right now. And for us to just now and then, because one party wants something done a different way, to just say, okay, we'll do it a different way, that doesn't meet our obligation as a commission. For these reasons, I would move that we, and let me go back to the beginning here and say, we as a commission desire to have a good relationship. This agency desires to have a good relationship with the city of Boise and support them in worthwhile projects to develop areas of the downtown and to make these things work. I wish a year or two ago, or even before that, the city had said, hey, we want to make a special district here where there could be slightly different criteria because we have these objectives. Here we are, it's kind of like we're closing the barn door after the horse is out already. And that's the problem here. And for these reasons, I would move that we dismiss this appeal because the city does not have standing, they're not the applicant, for all the reasons I've mentioned and many others that have been presented.
I'll second that. It's been moved and seconded that the city's appeal be denied because of lack of standing. All in favor, say aye.
Mr. President, can we have a discussion before you vote? This just seems really rushed and unnecessary.
No, we have to vote, but go ahead.
I understand that, but your entire demeanor across this, after Commissioner Hansen has been talking, is.
We can talk about my demeanor later. Do you have something you want to discuss?
Yes, that's exactly what I just said. I just said, let's have a discussion before we vote. And you're just saying, no, let's vote. That is not how we have to do this.
Would you like to make some comments?
Yes.
Please do.
I would like to say that, Commissioner McKinney, I agree on a couple of your points. However, I agree that you're saying, yes, hypothetically, all projects are unique, right? They all have their unique circumstances, but that totally negates the fact that we do have some extraordinarily unsafe circumstances within that Broad Street corridor due to Myrtle and Front. It is extremely, have you ever walked it down there? I'm just curious.
I've been in the general area walking, yes.
Have you walked down Broad Street though?
Not recently, no.
Okay. And that's fine, but I'm just saying that I understand where the city is coming from, and even with the bollards, which originally I'm like, I think that's a great compromise, Christy. You know, we're trying to meet them in the middle, but it really doesn't satisfy the city's vision. And I think truly what that corridor does need is making it truly pedestrian friendly, because just having those garage doors, although it's, you know, it might not have the function all the time with the bollards or whatever, it does detract and doesn't really enforce the vision of that actual corridor and making it safe and pedestrian friendly and making it like the actual destination that it could be. Because Front and Myrtle are drastically unsafe, and we've seen so many crashes and crashes and deaths. So it is a unique circumstance. However, I am very disappointed and I understand the developer's predicament. I understand our predicament, similar to what Commissioner Hansen had said. No one's at fault here, but instead of, and I feel like as the land use agency, it's their vision that we need to support them in that. But I think just with how the cards have been played here and not having that the collaboration that needs to happen, the policies that need to be symbiotic, I'm not one to I don't want to say punish, but hold the developer accountable for those mistakes that the agencies may or may not have made in this decision. So although I agree with Commissioner Hansen wholeheartedly, I just disagree on perhaps the approach in fixing these policies ASAP, so this type of challenge and appeal doesn't ever happen again, because we need to be walking hand in hand and understanding the vision and making sure that this type of oversight doesn't happen again. Thank you.
And Mr. President, I don't want to have us overlook the time and effort that Christy and her team has put into this application and the very reasons why they are following this policy and have recommended that we do not veer from it. And it was a safety issue. We're talking about safety down there, and Christy spoke to the safety concerns if the access was solely on 6th Street. So, I think we need to keep that in mind as well. It's more than just looking at the policy and reading what it says. There are just some definite safety concerns there. So, I wanted to make sure we were paying attention to that too.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I believe we have members of the public who'd like to testify.
Well, and we have a motion. And depending on how the motion goes, we can take the testimony as community input.
And I just want to say, Commissioner Pickering, I appreciate your thoughts, and I would have to agree with you there on that. So, are we calling for the decision?
Yes.
For the vote?
So all in favor of Commissioner McKinney's motion, say aye.
Aye. Aye. No.
Any opposed?
No. I think we should have public testimony.
The motion carries.
Which is now foreclosed.
We will now go into the final portion of our commission meeting, which is public communications. And if you'd like to give us what you came to talk about now, you feel free.
Always reconsider on.
Thank you, Commissioners. Am I on? I'm Kay Hummel. I reside at 420 East Crestline Drive. I came down here originally to talk with you about the 5-year IWP, but I believe that will be on other work sessions and of course a public hearing 2 weeks hence. So I would like to offer data which Commissioner McKinney and others are interested in on the Central Addition area, because I have specific data and facts that I can offer you should you reconsider the decision you just made on the waiver and the standing. And the reason I can offer these facts is I am a investor owner of Boise Brewing. I am a native of Boise, and I commented on the Central Addition Master Plan, which is now 8 or 9 years old and needs updating, by the way. And I think the city is aware of this. The city is shorthanded in its planning staff. The facts I can offer you about safety down there are multiple, and I also speak from the experience that I was an employee of Hummel Architects in the period 85 to 87, off and on, when the first and best parking facilities in the city's downtown core were built on Idaho and Maine, 2 of them, and also the one that is underneath the center on the Grove. I know a lot about them, even though I don't have the professional credentials. I was there. I observed many CCDC meetings and the resulting process that helped make those great and safely accessed structures. In addition, for a number of years, I ran a treasure hunt through downtown, an arts and history treasure hunt. I am very familiar on the street, not only as a member and owner of Boise Brewing, but as the originator of this treasure hunt that took place on our streets using historic buildings, art, and architecture in these areas. So I got the permits from Boise Police to hold these events, let them know. I made sure there was liability for our participants and that we had safety people posted on that. So I speak from those experiences about these issues down there. I consider this waiver to be of utmost importance, not only because it's unique, and because there is a conflict of policies from city land use and your policy manual about access requirements on lower classified streets as a preference. I think Commissioner McKinney, you raised a good point earlier when you asked about VTD versus just the ranking of the streets use. I'm also a cyclist, as some of you may recall, as well as a walker, and I ride 6th Street, I ride Broad Street, and I access both in my automobile for a variety of reasons. So let me just say that, and the other thing you can observe in this area is a high pedestrian use, jaywalking all the time on Broad Street and on 6th, but let us be aware and mindful of the actual conditions that 6th Street is one way going north, 2 or 3 lanes, depending on what part of it you're on. The city wants to change that, and I believe you do, to 2-way, but right now, and for the foreseeable future, it is 1 way, and it's usually balls to the wall, people wanting to get north. It's not really very safe. So taking access off of it because the policies dictated as the lower ranked street classification wise is not wise. I think it's scary to have slowing traffic making turns in and out of this huge new important project from 6th. And I support the city's waiver to keep it on Broad, and I also applaud Ms. Little's attempt at consensus to have an emergency temporary or off and on use one from 6th to satisfy all interests. I see also that Concordia has transformed into the University of Idaho Law School, and there is a lot of daily use by people on foot going back and forth to the coffee shop next to the Wilder and Boise Brewing, and etc. Also, the policy manuals for both organizations call for more storefront access at these great new high-rise projects arise. So that brings up the question for you and for the city of storefront access is great. We love how it builds our pedestrian feel, and we've achieved that in a lot of ways on 8th and Idaho and Bannock and Maine, even though some of those carry huge volumes of traffic daily because design is taking care of that. And some of these comments, of course, go to next week's design review. But I want to talk to you about safety because that's your jurisdiction and about your waiver requirements in 7104.1. One of those waiver requirements is extraordinary cost and expense that the developer is encountering, and they have testified to that. I don't need to say more. The safety thing I am very strong about because, for instance, on Broad, if with drop-off and with our Uber kind of takeout food that is likely to continue, the Wilder offers takeout, the coffee shop has in and out, Boise Brewing has in and out, especially during how pandemic has altered the way of doing life downtown. There are so much drops, eats, pickup business. So among all of you people, ACHD and the city, you need to have a couple more pull-offs in the designs of these large storefront-based high-rise projects. So a person such as myself who wants to fill my growlers at Boise Brewing has a place to do so, and I don't park illegally. I attempt not to. I'm very mindful that Trader Joe's, if I try to park in their lot to access Boise Brewing, because there is no parking on Broad, will kick me out. So I find legal places, but now and then I park illegally in the alley between the Wilder and the original site of Boise Brewing to run in and get my growler filled because I cannot find a parking place for 3 blocks. Okay. But that's okay, that's just me. But I think I'm not alone. There's a lot of drive-in, drive-out, pickup, transit people using their automobiles. There's people doing it on bikes. And then there is the flood of law students and all these residents starting to live in the Central District because of the wonderful projects we have for high-density housing and the new hotels. There's a lot of them on foot. I run into them all the time because I'm down there a fair bit. People from out of town walking on foot from Winco with groceries to go to their overnight residence, what have you. We need to look at these existing conditions, regardless of what your policy says, and anticipate that we'll get more with the Ovation project. And I appeal to you on safety considerations and on the extraordinary costs the developer has put in to reconsider this, since you've already made a decision here today, and take these safety considerations and the waiver language you have in 7104.1 about extraordinary cost of development and expense to the applicant, who unwittingly did not understand we have two governmental bodies governing a very complex project with conflicting land use versus traffic responsibilities. I used to drive around with my late father, and we'd look at every new parking garage, and I would take him into them. And we did our own private assessments of which ones did it right and which ones didn't. All the ones subsequent to the three first good ones that were designed properly and worked well with the pedestrians and with safety. And there are a number that fall short, and a lot of it is cutting costs. A lot of it is not thinking out the consequences down the road. And some of it is due to the fact that people need to spend time on foot in these areas, observing traffic and pedestrian patterns and left-hand turns and all that as you make such a critical decision. So I'm giving you these facts and my experience down there of a long time and my work running events there. And I will further note that, you know, we don't have that many day in, day out festivals on that street. I think Broad can handle a good, well-designed, safe entrance for this large, wonderful building. And I will probably comment at design review on that too. But it is very unfortunate to consider that because the policies haven't caught up with each other and with the facts on the ground, that 6th Street would be mandated as the main entrance and egress. So those are my comments, and I appreciate being able to speak to this very much. And I appreciate how hard this is for all of you, given your rules and the jurisdictional questions. So thank you so much.
You do realize that with the decision today, 6th Street would not be the main access point?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
I do. I just want to point out there's safety issues both ways, actually. But I think Broad Street has better sight lines and safety, and that a pedestrian or a cyclist coming along that way could see turning or stopping trucks, deliveries much easier than on 6th. And as I noted, the North Street urge to get, or southbound, excuse me, I said northbound, the southbound urge to get down 6th Street to Myrtle is enormous and constant, and people aren't always paying attention. They just know they want to get to Myrtle and go left, go east. And so that's a busy corridor. We put up with a lot of construction in all parts of the Central District and on Capitol Boulevard, with making our urban fabric mesh with the high, lovely pedestrian needs and uses we have in downtown Boise. And I consider this just a watershed time for you guys to think about that and for the city to likewise address it.
Thank you very much. Quick question of Kay. Kay, would you support a change in our policy to allow for automatic standing for any city that wishes to appeal a decision to ACHD?
Yeah, as long as it meets, you know, general waiver language. Maybe you folks need to look at Mr. Price and others, the waiver language. I think it's pretty good.
We dealt with a private applicant a couple of weeks ago, and we recognized and heard him and then denied the appeal. But then this came in, and we realized our policies don't even let us recognize our partner, and we just finished having a really good session with them in early November, as having standing to come to us, which is bizarre, because if we weren't here, the city would have standing in front of itself to raise these issues. So it just seems to me it's logical, and this has pointed out a flaw in our policies, and so I would ask.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would go back to my earlier point, commissioners, that the year of pandemic's been really hard on all governing bodies. You all working remotely, your staff largely.
Oh, yeah.
And the city likewise. And the city is shorthanded in the planning area. And I'm not clear where Hovde development is based, but I can imagine just Wisconsin, correct. Their need to interface and how much easier it is sometimes to do these projects where you can go in and have a cup of coffee or a meeting near the project site or walk to it. And they were hamstrung by that. And so the other thing we all love to look at, and us old timers know, is how old this agency is and why you were created.
Right.
Were created because there was inequity with a bunch of different street departments in the county.
Yeah.
But you remain unique in the nation, except for the metro area of Portland, in running all street policy and safety and complying with all incredible traffic laws and requirements. You are unique in being county-wide. And it's a hard juggle with a booming city of Boise with many, many projects on its plate and probably not enough staff to process everything and get it, you know, getting all the dogs and ponies lined up in the same lane.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kay.
Is there anyone else that would like to address us for public communications? Okay, that being the case, this meeting is adjourned and we'll
Mr.
take...
President,
Yes.
before we do, I would like to add something that is sort of like a public communication, although it's kind of a secondhand. This is something I think that the commission ought to take into consideration for the future. I've had a number of residents who have expressed concern that all but one of our meetings each month are in the middle of the day. And some people have said, hey, that makes it very difficult for the public to be involved as much as they would like to. That's something that in the future perhaps we ought to consider to talk about our meeting times. Maybe would we perhaps add another meeting evening instead of middle of the day? In any case, just a concern that some residents have expressed that I think we ought to discuss at some point.
Good.
I totally agree.
All right, meeting is adjourned. We'll take 5 minutes between now and when our work sessions start. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and begin our work sessions. Our first work session has to do with the 2022 Master Street Map update, and Edmondson Batista is going to present that to us.
Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Edmondson Batista, ACHD Senior Transportation Planner. In today's meeting, we're here to kick off the 2022 Master Street Map update. This item is an information briefing only, so no decisions needed from the Commission at this moment. During this meeting, staff will provide an overview of the Transportation and Land Use Integration Plan, as well as an overview of the Master Street Map, and provide additional information regarding the ACHD Corridor Preservation Program and next steps. The Blueprint for Good Growth aimed at addressing the best method to manage growth for a sustainable future in Ada County, Idaho. Through the Blueprint for Good Growth and Communities in Motion planning effort, the public stated a desire for a better design of roads and increased coordination with adjacent land use. ACHD developed the Transportation and Land Use Integration Plan, or TILIP, in an attempt to better link land use and transportation planning. The mere product of the TILIP efforts are designed to help the cities and ACHD work more closely together and ensure that ACHD has the tools in place to respond to unique goals of each of its partner jurisdictions. In this slide, I will briefly explain each of the components, starting with the complete street policy. ACHD commitment to design street that balance user needs and incorporate elements that match the land use context. Through the context-sensitive design, a complete street can accomplish great public benefit, improve safety, increase transportation options, and strengthen the overall benefit of transportation investment and enhance air quality. The cost share policy clearly outlines the responsibility of ACHD and its partner jurisdiction when road amenities are desired within the public right-of-way. The cost share policy describes how a partnering agency and developer can work with ACHD to get these type of amenities included in a project. The Livable Street Design Guide contains detailed cross-section and recommended dimensions for the use of the public right-of-way. The guide explains upon the current functional classification system by linking each of the roadways to a specific land use context. For example, the industrial arterials and residential arterials. The award-winning plan, ACHD Livable Street Performance Measures. This document articulates the measure and procedure ACHD will utilize to gauge the impact and experience of various users of the transportation system. This is our latest plan adopted in 2021, and it has already been awarded by the American Planning Association Idaho Chapter GEM Award, and most recently, the Compass Leadership in Motion, Leadership in Government, Ada County Award. The Master Street Map was originally adopted in January 27, 2010, and last amended on October 28, 2020. The Master Street Map update is conducted on a biannual basis, or every 2 years. The Master Street Map complies with Idaho Code Section 67, 65, 17, Future Acquisition Map, which recommend the adoption of a plan to designate the land proposed for acquisition. The three primary purposes are to define a shared vision of the future road network between ACHD and its partner agencies, establish a countywide right-of-way preservation map, and establish an existing and future collector map. The Master Street Map helps establish a vision for projects in both the Integrated Federal Work Plan and the Capital Improvement Plan. ACHD policy established 2 amendment procedures for the Master Street Map. One is through ACHD's Standard Development Review process, which is the vehicle for processing and commenting on requests to amend the Master Street Map associated with a new development. Second is through a large-scale city or county-initiated comprehensive plan changes or sub-area plans. Within these procedures, policy establishes a step-by-step procedure that leads either to the approval or denial of a master stream modification. The changes identified through these procedures become effective upon approval of the ACHD Commission and are not constrained to the update two-year cycle. The ACHD Corridor Preservation Program is informed by the Master Stream Map. The Master Stream established preservation width for the ultimate build-out of ACHD transportation facilities. The Corridor Preservation Program uses the information to purchase right-of-way for future projects as development or redevelopment occurs. Some of the benefits of corridor preservation are listed in this slide. For example, between 2014 to 2021, ACHD purchased over 90 acres with a total of $8 million with an average cost of $2 per square feet. Taking this into account, and the current property value is shown to be over 3 times this value, ACHD is proactively cost-saving on projects. As next step, staff will continue coordination with multiple outreach efforts with the cities and county, following with additional work sessions during spring and summer of 2022, and come back in front of the Commission on fall of 2022 for adoption consideration. With this, I conclude my presentation. I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Edison?
No questions. Good job.
Yeah, it's very complete. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. President, and thank you, Edison. This is important. This is critically important. It projects long-term what our county is going to look like. And it's also a product of the fact that we have different jurisdictions providing different information, yet we're the ones who adopt the master street map. The cities don't, although they adopt a comprehensive plan. And my concern continues to be that because they're separated, our adoption of a master street map that projects out and preserving right-of-way out into the desert and farmland where development hasn't occurred yet, but might by 1 or 2 cities' authorization. We actually encourage development in an area where it's much more expensive to provide maintenance. So we don't do that balance of how much can we really afford to provide extensive maintenance to brand new developments further and further and further away versus the opportunity to provide the need to provide maintenance of what we've already authorized, the taxpayers are already in the hook for. So, and that, we often don't really delve into those two countervailing forces in the adoption of the master street map. So I hope the Commission understands as we adopt the update and not just simply update existing expansions and growth projections, widenings way out into the desert, and realizing that, future taxpayers, our obligations to taxpayers both today and into the future. So it really comes home to roost in our decision that we have to take on the master street map this year.
Anything else? Edison, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Our next work session is on the integrated 5-year work plan. It's our second session, and Christy Inselman, here you go.
Oh, yeah, this is.
Thank you.
Yeah. I did get, yeah, I went out and met with them yesterday. Thank you, Christy.
Well, good afternoon. It is an afternoon, yes. Christy Inselman, Senior Transportation Planner here at Ada County Highway District. I am here to present on, we just had a second public comment period on the integrated 5-year work plan draft, November 1st through the 15th. And this is just a presentation on what we heard from our public and partner agencies. So just here we are, a snapshot on the process. We're getting closer, all the grade ones. This is what we've come to talk to you about so far this year. We have 2 more work sessions. Well, technically just this is the last work session. And then we'll come back on December 15th for the adoption hearing. So we've been very active this year with you. So the purpose of today's work session is to review the project changes on the revised draft identified during those commission work sessions we held with you in September and October, as well as reviewing any public and agency comments we received on that revised draft, and then any recommendations, recommended revisions that staff has on that revised draft, and then preparation for the adoption on December 15th. So first, just quick review, the changes that the commission, during the commission work sessions. So this is a list of the project accelerations that we worked with you guys on. So there was a total of 13 projects that were accelerated or were moved back into the program from the initial draft to the revised draft. So the ones with the asterisk on it are ones that we had with that initial draft we had moved out, that working with you all, we moved back into the program. And this is just a summary of the projects that we added to the program, also through those work sessions. So these were 13 projects that we moved in and we're adding to the scoping efforts. And the results of those scoping efforts will come back to you in January on those items. So a summary of the comments that we received a total of 161 comments on the revised draft. We received 3 partner agency letters from the City of Boise, Meridian, and the City of Eagle. Those were the only partner agencies that we received feedback on the revised draft. We also received 151 public comments on the revised draft. So 101 online comments, online map comments through our award-winning interactive map. 56 projects tell us, phone calls, and then 1 neighborhood group letter. So the 161 was almost double, or a little over double actually, what we received on the initial draft that we put out back in July. So it was a great increase. So I will go through a summary of those comments that we received. The first is City of Boise sent a letter. They identified 2 different projects that they commented on. The first was the 5th and 6th Street Fort two-way conversion. They expressed appreciation for moving that project up to 2024. This was a project that was identified through the commission work sessions to accelerate this project. This is one that we would look to CCDC to come back to the commission because the funding commitment on this project to come back to you all with a presentation on how that would work and the funding commitment. State Street and 21st Street pedestrian crossing. The City of Boise asked for the bikeway. There's a Pleasanton bikeway that kind of ties into where this crossing would be. So they originally asked to accelerate the project to coincide with that bikeway. That bikeway is currently part of our bikeway signage program. So staff's recommendation would be to pull this bikeway out of the bikeway signage program, make it a standalone project, include the crossing with it, and then move design year up to 2023. The City of Meridian submitted a letter as well and had 4 different projects they identified. The first being their #1 request, which is Linder Overland to Franklin. That includes the Linder overpass that they have committed funding to. Their request was to accelerate design to 22, and our recommendation, design is occurring in fiscal year 22, and we will continue to coordinate with ITD on the project timing for right-of-way and construction of that project. Their request for the Linder Road acceleration also included a request for delaying the 10-mile road corridor projects. Staff's recommendation is not making any changes to that corridor currently. Those projects do benefit Meridian and CUNA, and all of the 10-mile road projects were in the top 10 prioritization requests from the City of CUNA. Lake Hazel, Locust Grove to Eagle. They didn't request anything specific on this project, acceleration or delays. They just general comment on the importance of programming this project. This project is actually going to be completed through a cooperative development agreement with the developer for construction in fiscal year 22 and 23. So that one actually, through the cooperative development agreement, is being accelerated. The Eagle and Overland intersection, again, it was just a general comment that this is of a programming importance on this intersection. This is programmed in the plan for design in 2025. The City of Eagle submitted a letter. This first slide addresses their comments regarding the Eagle Road and State Street and Quadrant intersection with the multiple components to that. Their first request was to take Aiken Street, Eagle to Second, make that a standalone project and accelerate construction to 23. Staff's recommendation would indeed make that a standalone project to help with some of the phasing of this particular project and accelerate construction to 2024. They did request that Plaza Drive expansion also be a standalone project with construction 23, sorry. Our recommendation is, so as far as the time frame, would have the design for this project to stay with the Eagle and State Street intersection, have design in 22, right-of-way 23 to 24, and construction in 25. So we're just not recommending that to be removed. There's additional traffic analysis that needs to be done, particularly on the Plaza Drive expansion. And then just the Eagle and State Street corridor, it would follow that same time frame of design in 22, accelerate right-of-way to 23, 24, and construction in 25. And obviously, all of those timeframes are contingent upon input from the City of Eagle on the project design.
Christy, on the Plaza and Eagle Road, keeping those two joined, I think the concern is having both Plaza and Eagle Road construction going on. I think that's still a concern.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to speak to that, the thought process from staff to keeping those together? I'm sure we're not ripping everything at the same time, but that's going to be a little bit of a hamstring type situation getting in and out of that area.
Mr. President, members of the commission, Commissioner May, it's really a good question. I know Eagle has brought this up on multiple occasions, and it is a concern. We have looked at this pretty carefully, and with Eagle's discussions and plans to hopefully change the configuration of the Plaza Drive intersection and add that additional leg there by the Walgreens, which is something that's in process right now. That's not all baked completely yet, but we know that they're working on that. And the other additions and construction required on the other side of Plaza, really that project, the Quadrant, is a single project. And Plaza is part of the Quadrant intersection, which includes small portions of 2nd Street, obviously Old Park, and how all that works together. And through the construction phasing process, when this project actually gets out for construction and we have the final design and we go into the contractual phase, we will work very closely with Albertsons and the other businesses in that area to ensure adequate access and circulation on Plaza during the construction. What we don't want to do is rebuild or touch the Plaza intersection twice.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
If we did that, that will cause, I think, more disruption than just going in once, working through the construction phasing process and being in and out at the Plaza intersection just one time, rather than trying to do these improvements on Plaza as a standalone project. It's really not a standalone project. It's part of the Quadrant.
It's just the timing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to take close attention to that because everything will just come to a stop.
Yeah, and Mr. President, Commissioner May, thanks for raising this, and we really do appreciate the thoughts on timing and the delicate nature of a downtown project like this. So we will take that into consideration as this project continues to
And I'm sure it'll be fine, just as long as we don't have everything shut down, because as you know, that's kind of the hub down there where everybody, shops and banks.
Certainly, all roads lead to that Plaza intersection in downtown Eagle. There's no doubt about that. Thank you very much, Commissioner May.
Thank you. So the other request from the City of Eagle, so Park Lane, State Highway 44 to Floating Feather, requesting that be added back into the program, and they had some intersection-specific improvements with regards to some dedicated westbound turn lanes. So staff's recommendation is to add the project back into the plan with design in 25 and right-of-way in 2026. This is a project we had added in during the initial draft, and with budget cuts, we moved it back out, but our staff recommendation is to move it back into those out years.
And
so
I think this is their number one now, right?
It is, I'd have to look on the list. I don't think it's their overall number one still remains the Linder, Franklin. the Linder Overpass project for the roads and intersections
I think
project.
their last
This
council meeting
one
we had.
may be under their, because it's a collector roadway, falls under their community program, so it may be their number one under that category.
Yeah, exactly, the intersection.
Yes. So there, other was some general comments with regard to the floating feather road corridor, for the bike ped improvements. These are obviously gaps west of Valentine. There's several schools, that utilize that corridor. So, floating feather from the map below, which I apologize, the colors are not great on that map to see it. But, everything basically floating feather, we already have it in the program. They were all added into the program this year. They were kept in after the revised, initial draft. And every one of those segments will include bike and ped improvements. And then, obviously, specific treatments along that corridor for those. We will work closely with the City of Eagle on the preferred treatment from the City of Eagle, and we will update the project descriptions according to their preferred treatment on that corridor. Because we know it is important and an important corridor for the cycling community. So, a summary of the public comments we received on the revised draft. There was a total of 158. We saw quite a few project support comments. Some of those projects that stood out on support were Lake Hazel, several segments of Lake Hazel and an intersection on Lake Hazel. We saw several comments on the Maple Grove corridor south of Victory, the widening projects there. We saw comments on State and Pierce Park, as well as the 8th and 9th Street corridor projects. We got quite a few comments on those corridors in support, as well as the crossings on Warm Springs Road. So project acceleration, again, some of those same projects rose to the top. They included the Maple Grove request to accelerate those back up to what they were before. State and Pierce Park request for accelerating that to 2024. If you recall, during the commission work session, that was already accelerated from 27 up to 25, and their request is to 24, as well as the Warm Springs pedestrian crossings, which are also programmed for construction at 24. Project scope, a lot of the comments that we received on the 8th and 9th Street corridors were regarding project scope, which staff has continued to work with the neighbors on what kind of treatments they would like to see. So we received really great comments on the type of treatments they want to see on those corridors that we will be sharing with the project teams. The project delays, we only received 3 project delay requests, and it was on State and Pierce Park, which is always interesting. 12 new project requests, just 8 general comments. And we did receive a letter from one of our neighborhood groups, and they also addressed the 8th and 9th Street. That was the preliminary comments were on the 8th and 9th Street corridors. And then the 8th Street bike facilities, which we have a project already in the plan on that, and we are also working with CCDC because they also have a project on the segment of that. And again, as always, we will share all of the comments we received with our partner agencies. And I just like to throw in some public comments that are kind of representative of the type of comments that we received on the different projects. Again, these are ones we heard quite a bit from State and Pierce Park, acceleration, Warm Springs and Maynard. We saw several from Maynard as well as the Sky Bar, and then the Longfellow 9th Street, as well as the Maple Grove. This one in particular was on the Maple Grove Amity to Victory Road segment. And these were all in your packet as well. Every comment that we received, there was a summary with every one of these comments in there. So we do listen, believe it or not. So the staff recommended changes to the revised draft moving forward into the adoption. The first is State Street and 21st Street pedestrian crossing. This was City of Boise's, to make this the Pleasanton Bikeway, make that a standalone project, combine it with the crossing and move design to 23. The Linder Road, Overland to Franklin, update the plan to identify design as occurring in 22. Aiken Street, Eagle to 2nd, make that a standalone. I should have put that in the notes, apologies. This would be a standalone project and accelerate construction to 2024. Plaza Drive, Eagle to 2nd, keep that with Eagle and State, but move design into 22, right-of-way 23, 24, and construction to 25. Same thing with Eagle and State Street component. Park Lane, move that back into the program with design 25, right-of-way and 26. Floating Feather, obviously continue to work with the City of Eagle on the preferred treatment on those corridors. And then the 8th and 9th Street corridors continue to work with those neighbors on the corridor treatment preferences. So with these staff proposed changes, with commission approval, these would be included in the adoption draft that would go out next week or later this week.
Mr. President, Chrissy, can you mail this to us, or is it the link in our, so that we have that? And I would like to just look over everything before I tender a vote, since I'm just seeing all this now. So,
Mr. Can we move that? I don't think I can move it back with the thing to put those back up on the screen. Sorry, I shouldn't have gone so fast. So if we have approval to move forward with these recommended changes, then we would release that draft for public consumption prior to the adoption hearing on the 15th. If we don't get a consensus, or at least a head nod from the commission, I'm not sure we would be able to make it for adoption on the date that we have.
I'm just not ready to move forward on this, because I still have some outstanding questions. I think we're making progress, and Director Wong and I had a great meeting yesterday. So, but yeah, I still do have some outstanding questions. And when we have a second, I just wanted to address this really quick.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. I was going to talk about that on the the public comment portion. So the letter I provided you was one that Kay Hummel had provided in September. Apologies, I didn't receive a copy of that letter, or it would have been included in your packet, or at least in the summary that we provided as part of this packet. One of the items that she did ask for, the Boise Hills, 7th to Mesa, that was a project that we had added into the program with the initial draft. But again, when I have to cut $60 million out of the program, generally last in, first out is what happened. So that one had been moved back out of the program.
So
it would be
the $60 million was based on the thought process that you said to the City of Eagle, you thought we were going to do the capital. So okay.
Yeah, we had some assumptions that we always, seek assumptions.
We really didn't cut. Okay.
Yeah, so we always seek assumptions on when I'm programming, because it is a lengthy process.
Gotcha.
And we had anticipated one thing, and we had to cut a good chunk out.
Mr. President,
which always makes me upset.
Christy, are we doing a traffic count out there on Boise Hills? We noticed yesterday, I went out and met with Kay and some of her neighbors. There's a counter across the road. Is that us?
Mr. President, Commissioner May, I can check. I did reach out to our traffic department to find, to address some of the questions that she had. I guess they had already looked at the request for the speed bumps there, but as far as a traffic count, that would be a different area, and I'm not 100% sure. Do you know? We don't know.
Well, I would just like to throw out there, if I can arrange to have staff, maybe Tom or Colby go out with me out there. I was out there yesterday. There's a significant gap in the sidewalk. Blind corners, etc. So I think we need to shine a light on that. And
and that was the project that we had added to the program, was to add that sidewalk in that section.
Oh, very good.
Where the gap was. So that we already had that project identified.
Okay.
And that's one that we would look to include in the next update.
Okay. We'll talk more, and then I can update the neighbors, because it definitely needs some work. So thank you for making me copy for everybody.
Of course.
Commissioners, once again for the record, Justin Lucas, Deputy Director of Plans and Projects here at the Highway District. I do just want to clarify something in the process. Christy did a great job in explaining this, and this is just me probably beating the dead horse. But what we're here today doing is reviewing those public comments. It's very typical for staff at this point to make changes to the document based on what we heard, and we're informing you of those changes today, which would then be published in the final draft that would come back to you for adoption. At that point, certainly the commission at the adoption hearing, let's say you hear additional public comment or you want to make additional changes, you have that opportunity. So that's kind of the process. And I just want to make it clear that unless we kind of get a really, bad vibe from the commission today at this work session, you're not making a decision, but we just want to be transparent that we do intend to make these changes to the plan. You could further change it at the adoption hearing, but we do intend to make these changes before publishing that final draft, which is our typical process when we do the public outreach.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. President. I obviously have some concerns and questions about the Eagle Downtown Mobility Project, and I wasn't going to take time because I know we're running late. So I do want to have that discussion, because I think there's some confusion about, commission direction, like the draft that went out, the commission direction was just kind of a consensus and a head nod. And when we had our joint meeting with the City of Eagle, it was the consensus and the go-ahead that they could put a pin in the project, and we had no objection. And then they talked about cost sharing and additional funding that was going to come our way. So the impression was that we stuck a pin in that project. Then everybody knows how it has evolved. So I do want to discuss that. It was their understanding and my understanding that once we put the pin in that project, that it would stay there until they went through the gates with the land acquisition, et cetera, and then with the timeline that they had established with our staff, that they were going to come back in August to share all that with us, and then we would act accordingly. If we needed to modify, change something or what, we would do it at that time, not punt it to 2026. So I do want to have that conversation because, and if my fellow commissioners remember it differently, but I do believe we were in agreement that we were going to honor their request, and that was a suggestion that we made to them, Director Wong did, to write a letter, and then they could hold their place in line, the 95% completion with the design, and wouldn't risk losing standing or the funding. That's not quite the case, but that's what we presented to them, and that is what they have operated under. So I think it's important that we keep that pin in that project until such time they come back with us with new information.
Mr. President? I'm sorry.
Let's go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Alexa.
Yeah, thank you for this, Christy and Justin.
Yes, always thank you.
Again, I think to Commissioner May's point, it's just a little confusing. Could you explain, like, what was the basis for these specific recommendations? Because, again, we went through such a long process, so much communication, so, like, why these shifts, I guess? Because we have to still go back to our, constituents, and yet, there were even more changes. So right. I guess it just kind of can get a little confusing when it looks like from the outside that there's a rolling, process to always add things in.
Mr. President, Commissioners, Commissioner Pickering, it's a good point. I mean, this year was very dynamic. The amount of drafts that we produced and the amount of changes to the integrated 5-year work plan through this specific process that we went through with the multiple work sessions with the commission and the direct input that we received. There was a lot of changes after that first draft, then we had the revised draft. I think this situation here is actually more typical, where we would come after the final public involvement period, where we come with some final staff recommendations for changes. Typically, most of these are project accelerations, which are not usually as controversial as project delays. And so there's been other project delays and other things that have happened. These are the changes after listening to the City of Eagle, reading their letter very carefully, looking back at the program that we believe are available and represent what we think is a good program going forward. Ultimately, it's at the Commission's direction. You can tell us, hey, looking at these today, no, just leave it as is and bring it back to us, and we prefer to make these changes at the adoption hearing. That's fine with us. We also are ready to make these changes before releasing that final draft. We believe these are very responsive changes to our partners. So that's the justification for making these changes.
Well, thank you for that. And I don't mean to split hairs, but I mean, when you guys came to us and said, we pushed back a project because of the budgetary constraints, and then now these changes are pretty small considering the entire work plan, right? So I'm not picking on these projects. I'm just saying, we take your word at, these are some budget constraints, so we had to make these changes, and yet here we are accelerating things which could impact and likely impact the budget. So it's those types of things that I'm wondering, what's getting lost in translation, or what did you have to do to make these numbers work, because they are going to impact the rest of the work plan.
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, it's a really fair question. And we always rely on a certain amount of what we call over-programming, which is placing projects into the program that exceed the budgetary, the projections that we have. some of these changes are relying on that principle of over-programming. And as we get closer, since we update this plan on a regular basis and we have the budget cycle and the budget adjustment cycle, some of these changes represented here as the projects progress. For example, let's say there's an issue that arises in the design that is unanticipated, or there's a complex right-of-way negotiation that goes south and we have some delay. We would then bring that back to the commission and say, although in the plan we anticipated this schedule, we are now having to delay that project by a year because of this specific issue. So it's a plan. And I think that's the key with the integrated 5-year work plan. You're not adopting a budget. What you're doing is allocating resources and providing direction to staff at a broader level than you would during your budget process. The budget process is direct allocation of funding by the commission. The integrated 5-year work plan is less direct allocation of funding by the commission, if I want to say it in that way, where you're basically directing us, these are our priorities, these are our goals, these are the project schedules that we want you to try and achieve. We take that into account, we lay it all out, and when there's issues with funding, timing, or anything else, we would then come back to you and say, yep, we realize we said 24, 25, whatever that year is, but here's the facts associated with what happened on this project, which there's changes all the time, and here we are today, and this is the schedule that we are representing. So that's kind of the process. Yeah, that's a good point.
I didn't catch, can you?
Oh, go ahead, Christy.
Apologies. I was just going to add on that when we had those work sessions with you guys, a lot of what we brought to you on this project for acceleration, we would have to delay is because some of those did fall within budget years. So those we did have to make much harder decisions on what had to be pushed back and what could be moved forward.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I just want you, first I want you both to know the appreciation that is felt for you and your team. This is a Herculean effort and a lot of changes, and we tried our new work session configuration down there. So when we come back with questions and are representing our constituents, that's just what it is. It's not to cast aspersions or to, throw in any sort of unnecessary criticism at the job you're doing. So I hope that you understand that and take this in the vein that it is intended. We have joint meetings all the time, and we decide things. We don't say, and as with this, we don't take, is there a motion, is there a second discussion, etc. It's a congenial thing. We agree, and I really feel strongly, and I really have to draw a line in the sand with the city of Eagle, because they did exactly what we asked them to do. They came to us. We said we weren't going to change anything, put a pin in it for a year. They were going to get all the land acquisitions, et cetera, and then move forward and come back in August. Things have kind of accelerated, so they are making good progress with what they're coming back to us with. So to change it, first without any discussion about that, and to hear through the grapevine, and I know you heard, I wasn't happy about that. I think we need to honor that discussion and agreement that we had with the city and keep that project there and honor our discussion with them as to the timeline with them coming back. So I really do feel that's important to do. If I notice on some of the other projects, there's like a number 20, et cetera. This project was not number 20. This was a project that was going to happen, and they were assured it was not going to get slipped or pushed aside. So I think we need to honor our agreement and handshake with them. So in my mind, that was commission direction.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yeah, so I would agree that I think that was my impression leaving from the meeting with the city of Eagle. I think it's real important, these partnerships with our cities, that they be significant in, we realize we may disagree with what the city's priorities are, but they're the land use agency, and they have other sets of resources. So I would agree we have to work and set the priorities based upon what the cities are providing input. I want to really appreciate you all in this cycle. I've had such good interaction and go back and forth that you've heard. I want to say me, but really I'm just echoing what I'm hearing from neighborhoods, and I have to sort through, what is or isn't our priority, in their own minds and what can and can't be done at a time. And I'm the one who goes back and says, you know, we've heard you. Because of resources, we can't really dive into this, even designing it for 4 years, but it's there, you know, and I'm gonna, at least while I'm here, I'll fight to make sure it stays on there so that they hear that that there's a sense of empowerment that they've been heard. And then as they go back and look, what I want to really appreciate, and I know the map is going to be updated, the interactive map, is that they are truly integrated as you identify. It's not just about, you know, in the past, it just said, we're going to put, you know, sidewalks on this. And we know there's other things that need to be done, that there's a way of describing that. Although that particular one may not have been scoped yet, there's a way of describing it that says, we're not precluding other things that are critical on this corridor, especially with respect to safety and speeding. And so, as I go back and I look at, and I don't know that we're going to see the interactive map reflecting these updates, right? Or is it? They will, okay? Good, I'll be looking at that, because that's kind of the way in which I've directed people to go look at it, to see a broader, less exclusive description of things that are going to happen in their neighborhood, so they know, okay, it's not just about someone's going to come in and paint a bike lane down my street in 3 years, you know, when these are the other issues I've raised. So there's a way in it is describing it. The other, I think, I really want to appreciate, the first time it's happened, I hope it happens much, much more often, and that's when Tom and Brooke took time and just basically walked through, almost like block by block, the areas that they're going to develop a scope on. And so that really felt empowering to us, that the input we were providing was being taken seriously. And I think we'll see that. Right now it just says, for example, on Warm Springs, from Broadway to Windsong, and really the input is, you know, we want to focus our energies on a third of that right in the middle, and probably can accomplish a huge amount of what we want to do on the whole corridor just by focusing on that. And I'm sure that will be reflected in the way it's described in the interactive map. So I just want to thank you. This really has been, I know it may feel a little tense sometimes, but this really has been a really good back and forth, so that we can go back and talk to people and say what it means.
May I just ask a quick question? These recommended changes, do they, are there any additional, you know, delays that these incur otherwise throughout the 5-year plan? Or is this sort of a summary of all the effects of the recommended changes?
Mr. President, Commissioners, this is a summary of the recommended changes. If we would have had significant delays, we would have represented those to you. As I stated, we are relying on the concept of over-programming to achieve some of these changes. So that, to be as transparent as I can, projects are programmed that we don't necessarily, today at this point, through our projections, our budget projections, have the funds identified. But, you know, the funding for this agency, it's a large agency, and there is, you know, large amounts of funding that come in, some of which is anticipated, some of which is unanticipated. There may be another project that gets delayed for whatever reason that allows us to move forward on a project. In the integrated 5-year work plan, what this does for us is it helps us emphasize the need to stay on that schedule and be ready to construct a project if the funding is available. And if we don't do that, then we're never ready to construct anything. So it really depends. That's why we update it so often. It really is a dynamic process, and we go through that on an annual basis to do so. I hope that answers your question. And Commissioner May specifically, we enjoy working with the commission. We never, just so you know, we appreciate your feedback. It's why we're here. We work for you, and we're glad to listen, and we try to provide recommendations and products that meet your you know, qualifications and needs. We do our best to do that. Sometimes we might fail. Tell us. We'll try to bring it back better the next time. That's what we do.
Especially this year.
and adding the scope to the integrated 5-year work plan map, it's made my residents very gleeful because I showed it on my Zoom call, and they were just like, "Oh my gosh, it's there!" So I know that was a discussion point that we talked about, Justin. So I just want to let you know how of a positive impact that made, to know that their input was reflected, even though it's a future project, but it's there and they got to comment on it. So thank you.
Commissioners, yeah, we're glad to make those kind of changes, and we're glad to do that. And speaking specifically to the state and Eagle project commissioners, the recommendation from staff is on the board. That's based on our analysis of what we believe is possible on that project in the current timeframes, the work with Eagle that we have today, the unknowns associated with that project that still exists today. That's how we made that recommendation. So we were not in any way trying to break a promise, wasn't our intention. We were looking at it as staff typically does with what do we think is possible, and that's how we came up with those recommendations.
I remember in past years when we've had to delay projects, and it's just something, my opinion, from my district, my constituents is, okay, I shrug my shoulders, understand it, and go out and explain it. But I think it's fine with me that we publish this, but I think you ought to expect some discussion between now and the 15th, and possibly some changes on the 15th.
And totally appropriate, and we would expect no less.
Yeah.
And commissioners, we appreciate that direction.
Yeah, I would agree with Commissioner.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Any additional questions?
You know Commissioner May's phone number.
I probably should give her mine. No,
Okay.
we like to think out of 525 projects, we only got a few wrong.
Thank you.
We'll do better. You're welcome.
All right, then with that, we're done. We're going to retire to the room behind us and for our last item.